This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation is still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news. Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more. The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo has returned, all of us together here on Columbus Day. It's October 14th. Bond market closed. I don't know what we're going to do with ourselves in the data checks. Lisa Mateo will be truncated this morning as well. But a really interesting day, Paul. And to me, the levels on futures set higher than the close. 5,800 SPX, 43,000 Dow, rounded up, 21,000 NASDAQ. 100. I think it's a bull market.
It feels like it. It feels like it. I'm looking at the commodity space as well, Tom. Got oil pulling back a little bit, off about 2.3%. WTI crude oil just under $74 a barrel right now, so maybe a little bit easing some of the concerns are in the Middle East, but we'll have to see.
We're going to have to see. Troy Gajewski with us right here in a moment. We're celebrating the Nobel Prize in Economics. Tell you about that in a moment. We're celebrating a conversation with Sir Keir.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer,
exactly.
Labor Prime Minister, with our Stephanie Flanders. It'll be the 9 o'clock hour.
Exactly right.
And there's a real turmoil there. He has not had 100 days.
I was going to say, it was not a honeymoon those first 100 days for
like
Mr. Starmer.
100 hours.
Yes, exactly.
Something like that. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa's back.
Oh, boy.
I am back in the saddle. Good morning, guys. Well, futures right now, we are mixed. Investors kind of weighing the impact of fresh, shiny stimulus, looking ahead to major earnings this week. And that includes the like of United Airlines, Johnson & Johnson, Walgreens, and also Netflix. We'll also learn more about the health of the financial sector. We have reports out this week from Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. So let's get to futures. NASDAQ futures up about 0.2% at 20,503. We have Dow futures down about 0.1% at 43,077. S&P futures up about 0.1% at 5,868. The bond market, yes, closed for the Columbus Day holidays. We'll move over to commodities. Spot gold lower, $2,655 an ounce. We have Brent crude lower, $77 a barrel. WTI crude, $73 a barrel. Few companies making news. That's Boeing. Its shares down nearly 2%. It said it'll record $5 billion of charges, cut about 10% of its workforce, or 17,000 people. And finally, a milestone for SpaceX. The company readies its rocket for commercial operations. Here's what it did. Its Starship completed a test flight. It included catching the vehicle's booster back at the launch pad. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. We're on YouTube. It's our new digital way, expanding each and every day. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Out on YouTube, you're in your commute, you get to your living room, you get to your office.
Sure, it's everywhere.
So do you have it at the beach house?
Oh, absolutely. You bet.
In every room?
It's surround sound.
On the deck?
Yeah.
You
patio.
You can look at Carol and Tim and the dolphins in the distance.
Crazy dolphin action on the Jersey Shore this weekend.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
They were everywhere.
Clean water makes a big difference there over the last number of decades. Joining us now, and this is really an honor, from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Troy Gajewski joins us this morning, Chief Market Strategist at FS Investments. Troy, I'm going to do an audible here. You can keep up. In 1957 at MIT, the world changed, literally, folks, with a guy named Robert Solow. And Troy, you studied chemical engineering, but MIT is economics and Sloan Business School, where Simon Johnson worked so much together. Tell me about the economics overlay at MIT, even if you were over with the smart kids in engineering.
Yeah, Tom, it's a great question. Good morning to you. Like we always remind investors, GDP equals C plus I plus G plus delta X. And, right now, even the consumer is not in the incredibly strong shape they were a year ago or 2 years ago because of all the excess savings. And obviously, we had a white hot labor market. The consumer is still in really good shape. And we're in the midst of a massive business fixed investment and CapEx boom, driven partially by AI, but also driven by various infrastructure spends. And then, of course, you and I both know that there's no political appetite at all in D.C. To cut spending anytime soon. So you put it all together, we have an economy that's decelerating in terms of growth, but still on a very healthy growth trajectory. which will clearly disappoint the perma bears in equity markets.
The Nobel Prize winners, particularly Acemoglu and Johnson at MIT, say technology matters. Troy, is this bull market a technology bull market?
It's been a technology bull market really going back to 2017, Tom. I think that's when it first dawned on everyone, and some of us, admittedly, even myself, it took us a while to figure out. But, we have the most powerful companies in the world in terms of cash flow margins, in terms of earnings growth potential. Recently you've seen this incredible spend on AI and data centers, which account for about 70 basis points of the U.S. $29 trillion nominal GDP. So whether you're in public equities, where unfortunately you're getting growth at either unreasonable prices or expensive prices, given where those companies trade and where the S&P trades, or you're in private markets, having some exposure to that tremendous growth in data centers and AI is very important to generate outsized returns for your investors.
Hey, Troy, we're getting just beginning of the earnings season right here. What are you looking for here when you, over the next several weeks, as you start hearing from corporate America?
Well, yeah, so I think the last several earnings cycles, there's been two really major questions. One, can mega cap tech, the hyperscalers and the cloud, continue to grow margins faster than they grow their spends on AI and the various applications they're in? And what we've seen is they continue to do so. And even if there is some compression in their margins, it looks like equity investors will give them a pass for the time being because there's so much belief in the growth potential in AI. As you know, another MIT professor is a little bit more skeptical on that, so we'll see how that plays out. And then the second big question has been, has the U.S. consumer slowing, or is there some signs of more pernicious activity? And obviously the lower end consumer, in some earnings reports, it shows that they're cracking, but more broadly, the U.S. consumer is in really good shape. And you've started to see that from the banks as well in terms of, delinquencies have gone up on certain areas like credit cards, but overall the consumer credit quality is in very good shape. So those are the two biggest macro questions we continue to ask as we go into every earnings season, whether it's applied to public markets or private markets.
What do you think of Mag 7 here? I thought, there's some really nice treatment this weekend, really thoughtful articles. I thought Barron's did a great job of just thinking through Mag 7. Troy Gayeski on the permanence of Mag 7.
Yeah, so I think when we think of the Mag 7, we always pull Tesla out, and then we add Eli Lilly.
Yeah, I saw that. Troy, this is important. A lot of people are really going Mag 7X Tesla, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's been the case for quite some time. I mean, as you know, Tesla's been a controversial name in the hedge fund industry for a long, long time. They continue to, I think, disappoint those that wanted to short aggressively up until recently. But Tesla's a very different animal, right? Because its operating margins aren't nearly as high. It continues to be based more on the hope that there'll be transitional technologies. Whereas if you look at the other, say, the hyperscalers, Meta, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they have tremendous growth potential that's very real. And then you segue over to NVIDIA. It's been the greatest growth story in the history of capital markets in terms of growing earnings and cash flow faster than market cap. And, the historic market cap surge from $1 trillion to $3 trillion was backed up by even better earnings and cash flow growth. And their cash flow margins are at really ridiculous levels. So, when you think about going forward, it's not that other parts of the market aren't important, because clearly they are. But if you look forward, the only way to get that increase from 12.1 to 13.2% operating margins for the S&P is if there's even more concentration in markets. And so what we're finding these days is more investors are embracing market cap weighted indices and then complementing that with private markets exposure, whether it's in private equity, particularly middle market private equity, with an emphasis on secondaries, or whether it's in private credit. Those are really the complementary alternative strategies right now for broader market exposures.
Troy, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate it. Troy Gayeski with FS Investments this morning to get us started. It's just, I just don't see, Paul, the exuberance you and I have witnessed in other equity markets. And maybe it's because of all the new vehicles, particularly the predominance of the Eric Balchunas ETF
exactly.
world.
We have to talk to Eric Balchunas.
The products we're in maybe don't lead to exuberance like they used to.
Well, I mean, you got the S&P 500, Tom. It's up 22%. The S&P equal weighted index up 14%. So, I mean, no matter where you look, you're seeing some really strong performance in the equity markets, and we'll see how the earnings unfold here over the next several weeks, whether the earnings are there to support these stock prices.
Bonds closed, equities up, futures up 8. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Biden was in Florida Sunday for the second time in 2 weeks surveying hurricane damage. Biden has announced $612 million for projects related to help areas damaged by both Hurricanes Milton and Helene. The president spoke in St. Pete Beach.
This is all a team effort, folks. We made a big difference, and it's saved lives. But there's much more to do, and we're going to do everything we can to get power back in your homes, not only helping you recover, but to help you build back stronger.
The city of Sarasota, Florida, took a direct hit from Hurricane Milton. Mayor Liz Alpert says everybody is all hands on deck.
There's still no water out to the barrier islands or power, but we're hoping by maybe end of the day Monday that will be resolved.
Mayor Alpert spoke on ABC's This Week, which you can hear Sundays on Bloomberg. Israel says 4 of its soldiers were killed and more than 60 people were injured after a Hezbollah drone strike against an army base in northern Israel. It comes as the U.S. is sending advanced missile defenses to Israel. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
The Pentagon says the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense Battery, or THAAD, will buttress Israel's own air defenses, the Iron Dome, with an attempt to deter Iran from further attacks. The Pentagon also says it will send associated troops to operate the systems. Each system has 95 soldiers attached to it. The Pentagon says the action underscores the U.S. ironclad commitment to the defense of Israel from Iran attacks. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
The Nobel Prize in Heartbreak this year goes to Lane Thomas.
Here's the pitch to him. He swings and drives it high in the air. Left field. Will it make the bleachers? Grand slam! Lane Thomas has put the Guardians in front with a grand slam.
Or they stayed in front. Michael Barr, it's a great season. I mean, it was a season of joy.
We played on house money. I'm not going to lie. Listen, and Tarek was great. I mean, Scooble, I love him.
Okay, we got to go to Paul Sweeney. We're not giving him enough airtime here in the Yankees. Doug Cass had out the payroll, Yankees, Mets, whoever else, and then there's the Clevelands.
Yeah, the
Clevelands are making like what Aaron Judge is
minimum wage.
making. Yankees, Cleveland, what do you think?
Who knows? I mean, I think it's going to be a fun series. I mean, the Yankees are definitely favored. And we'll see how the pitching is for the Yanks on the starting pitching. Their bullpen's their strength. So we'll see. And it's also about Mr. Judge. How big will he be in
Really?
this series? Yeah.
How did he do in the last series?
Okay. Which is better than what he's done in the past, which is not good.
The Mets, I remember.
Well, the Mets had a tough one last night.
Oh, this is great. But congratulations to everybody in support of the Detroit Tigers. They made October and September go by. Bloomberg surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing. Call an Oppenheimer professional today. All right, we've got futures mix this morning. This is after two of Wall Street's main indexes set new records, talking about the Dow and the S&P. We'll check in with them right now. We have Dow futures down about 0.1% at 43,074. S&P futures right now up 0.1% at 5,867. NASDAQ futures up about 0.2% at 20,500. Treasuries trading closed for the holiday today. We have some deal-making news, though. We have B. Riley Financial. It's agreed to sell its Great American unit to Oak Tree Capital for about $400 million. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. You have B. Riley shares up about 15%. And Lundbeck, it's going to buy Longboard Pharmaceuticals for $60 a share. Longboard up about 49%. And private equity groups, TPG, Blackstone, they're teaming up to work on a joint bid for eye care company Bausch & Lomb. That's according to the Financial Times. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, great to have Lisa back, don't you think?
Yeah, I had no idea where she was. I don't know when she was coming back or what's going on.
She's no John Tucker.
No. I mean, she gets the surveillance jet and she just goes.
Somebody said, where are the newspapers? I guess we're going to do them tomorrow. Is that
tomorrow?
Okay.
Wait one more day.
Your people said you needed downtime.
The anticipation builds.
Rodeo Drive. Right. Lisa Mateo driving everything we do here at Bloomberg Surveillance. This is an honor. I saw a line this weekend of Goldman Sachs readjusting their China guess. And now the chief economist for guessing what China's going to do next, Freya Beamish, joins us with T.S. Lombard. Immense respect for her cred on gaming Beijing and the system. Can you guess GDP in China now, Freya, or is it a fool's errand?
Yeah, I would start from the nominal GDP, looking at the leading indicators there and how much they've had to contract liquidity growth in order to support the renminbi until the summer. It's just really hard to see nominal GDP growth getting above 1 or 2% by the beginning of next year, and that's a major issue for any economy. But by Chinese standards, that's a really serious issue.
2% nominal GDP. What does that do to employment? Do they see protest in cities that Paul Sweeney and I can't pronounce?
So there's an indicator that we track that does look at instances of social unrest, and it actually immediately before we had this big revelation of the attempt to stimulate the economy, that was actually spiking. So before we even get to the stage of this kind of prediction on nominal GDP growth, we already have evidence of social unrest, and that's borne out in the labor market data to the extent that you can actually trust any of the labor market data. But there are some indices that we follow, and that suggests that wage growth is at the lowest, almost at the COVID lows, and sort of standard deviations below the pre-COVID rates. We know that youth unemployment is a very big problem. So this is why the authorities are having to make this pivot towards domestic demand.
What does it mean for the China policy as it relates to the rest of the world, the global economy? How do we think about China and its impact as a supplier of products and as a user of products and services on the global economy?
So the policy up until a few weeks ago was essentially a sort of a China 2.0, that they'd sort of saturated the economy with debt over the period between global financial crisis and kind of up until a few weeks ago. And so they'd reverted to a pre-global financial crisis model where they're essentially just relying on external demand to make up for the deficiency of domestic demand, because there's no capacity to absorb anymore. There's no capacity to run up leverage in the private sector anymore. And that was a hugely deflationary prospect. And it was never going to work from the perspective of the rest of the world, because China had already done China 1.0 and now it's massive. And so there just wasn't the space in the global economy for China to run that kind of a surplus anymore. But it was never also going to work from a domestic standpoint. Going back to the previous question, this deflationary path that they had chosen was also starting to impinge upon domestic wage growth. And that was the ultimate part of the social contract that just couldn't be broken. And so I think what they've realized in the past few weeks, hopefully, is that they can't continue down that China 2.0 path. And that's something that's good for China, and it's very good for the global economy as well, which is not to say that immediately we get out of the deflationary draft that China has started to create in those sectors of corporate goods, because it was a big kind of shock, a supply shock that they put onto the world economy. But it certainly means that they're not digging the hole any deeper at this stage.
All right, if they're not digging the hole any deeper, let's turn to the U.S. Is the Fed in their 50 basis point cut and presumably an easing posture, is that enough for the U.S. economy and for the global economy?
Yeah, I think actually the sort of the profile for risk assets going forward is supported from both poles of the economy. So at one side, you've got China saying, look, we're going to do our version of whatever it takes. I think there's still a few more kind of things coming through there. And then at the other pole of the global economy, as you're suggesting, the Fed is saying, okay, well, we're going to do, it doesn't actually seem to take that much actually to turn the US economy around, but they certainly want to seem to stay ahead of the curve. And so that's something that should help risk assets going forwards. When we look at the kind of the composition of the US labor market, certainly with the jobs numbers that came out most recently, that it seems to be an economy that is very resilient for a number of reasons. I think there's still a cyclical tailwind from previous stimulus that's still in the economy in terms of the money that's in people's bank accounts. And also this is a secularly shifting economy, right, where the kind of the mix of policy is much more conducive to higher natural rates of interest.
The animal spirit, Freema, the top line, you mentioned a shocking number, 1-2% animal spirit in China. All you need to know, folks, that doesn't get it done. In the United States, it's an act of God, 4%, 5%, dare I say, persistently. Is it because we're debt-induced, we're debt-fueled, that gives us this higher, stronger animal spirit?
I think it's about whether this is demand-led or supply-led. And I think that's actually the lesson that China is learning right now. It's never going to transition into a sort of fully private consumption-led economy, but the global economy can actually learn a lot from the US economy at the moment. Not to the extent that maybe some of the Fed narrative of this being a supply-led economy, but this being an economy which is a high-pressure economy. It's been run hot, wittingly or otherwise. And so demand is actually helping to rebuild supply. And we start to see a breakout in productivity growth with the trends there looking like they're stronger than just that kind of cyclical upswing that you would expect as real incomes start to grow. That's the type of economy that we really are looking for on a kind of a secular basis from a risk asset perspective. One that is capable of maintaining higher pressure.
Freema, thank you so much. Freema Beamish there with an important update on China, something to overlay in here. The guesstimate, if you will, Paula, where we are Q4 in China. Can we do a moment of silence for Lucas Shaw, who I believe last night got 6 hours sleep? I watched his Howard Stringer interview with Sony. And there's the way Lucas interviews these fancy people, like he's shockingly direct with people that don't like to be direct.
Right.
And I can't say enough, folks, about screen time. It's this newsletter Mark Gurman's got power on, Greg Giroux with ballots right now, just hugely important in the political season. But screen time is just great. It comes out Sunday evening. Subscribe to the newsletter Screen Time, and then once a year he does his confib. I'm surprised you weren't out there.
Exactly. No, he has some great folks out there this year out in Los Angeles, and from all over the I guess the media landscape, the entertainment landscape. He's
Scooter Braun.
Yeah, exactly.
Ex-Taylor Swift.
Yep.
Scooter's considering Lisa Mateo.
Exactly.
Handling Lisa.
So they had great people out there, and it's great to see Lucas doing so well out there. And again, his newsletter is great. His reporting on the Bloomberg terminal and Bloomberg.com, fantastic. So they have a great media and entertainment team. Bloomberg News does out there in Los Angeles.
So we'll see. We'll get him in here as we can. He really likes to do it in studio. We'll try to get him when he's wandering into our New York audience. On this Columbus Day, it's real simple. The VIX 20.53 bond market closed. We got an elevated futures. It's red and green in the screen, but it's SPX up 8 and NASDAQ up a spirited amount. NASDAQ is up a good, I'm trying to get it here with a gerbil. There it is. Up 0.3%. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen, and this is after the Dow and the S&P rewrote the record books. We'll check in with them now. We have the S&P futures up 0.1%, 5,867. Dow futures down 0.1%, 43,060. Nasdaq futures up about 0.2% at 20,500. Bond market closed for the Columbus Day holiday today. The economic calendar also quiet for today. Tomorrow, though, we have a report on manufacturing. Wednesday, a read on import prices. Then Thursday, we have retail sales. Initial jobless claims will round off the week with housing starts and building permits. Have to point out, Bitcoin up more than 3% at 64,000, just about. Crypto-linked companies, they are rallying. We have MicroStrategy, Clean, Spark, Marathon Digital up more than 5%. Coinbase Global up more than 4% too. And finally, companies making news. True Value filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Agreed to sell its operations to rival hardware chain Do It Best. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Wow. That's like a passing of part of America.
Yeah. Holy cow.
True Value.
That's,
all right.
That's like
value.
Sears half buck.
Yeah. Craftsman tools. Remember that back
Craftsman.
in the day?
My father, if it wasn't Craftsman, it didn't go in the house.
Working.
None of that fancy
What
German
happened to
stuff.
Sears? Remember, I mean, how big was Sears?
We were
for
talking about the
everything?
Sears Christmas catalog the other day, explaining to Afterthought you would sit on your knees in the living room and look at the Sears catalog. It is a day of a Nobel Prize. We were honored to have Troy Gayeski with us from MIT, and it's clearly an MIT day, but it is a day of economics, and I want to talk now about, and this is a guy that really supported me early on. People were going, what are you doing in economics? If you are ever so lucky, you're considered for a Nobel Prize in economics, and sometimes there's moments where somebody should win and doesn't. Johanna Chua joins us right now with Citigroup. We're going to talk China in a moment, but you and I have to agree that no one was more qualified on fiscal economics to take a Nobel Prize than Martin Feldstein.
Yes.
No one. Just, that's all there was to it. Tell us what it was like studying under Martin Feldstein at Harvard.
Oh, it was great. I mean, he was obviously, he was a giant, an intellectual giant. He was very supportive. So, I mean, I was very, very lucky to be able to work with him. Him and David Cutler at Harvard. That was a long time ago, back in the mid-90s, back in the late 90s.
Did he throw chalk like they do at MIT in class? He gets so angry?
He was a very, very kind gentleman, man. No, absolutely not.
But to be clear here, folks, if you die, you can't win the Nobel Prize. You have to be alive to win the
Is that right?
Nobel. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's
Okay.
it. And there's some, we lost Martin Feldstein way too early, and never say never, but we celebrate the growth economics and technology economics at MIT today, and Chicago, I should point out. Johanna Chua, you're an expert on China out of Hong Kong with Citigroup. Is China falling behind technologically? If Acemoglu, Johnson, or Robinson looked at China, are they technology losers?
I think there's no one-size blanket, kind of statement, because it depends on which part of technology. I mean, clearly in some parts of technology, China is winning, right? When it comes to clean tech, when it comes to dominating supply chain on metals and minerals, they pretty much, have it, down to pat, to the point that Western nations are now all running after each other, putting tariffs. But obviously, I mean, they're still catching up on semiconductors, which is one of the weak points, and that's what Biden administration has been trying to do. So obviously, that's inducing them to double down on industrial policy, and that's why people are very worried, because this type of strategy of industrial policy, which is very supply friendly and lack of demand support, is basically a recipe for deflationary pressures. And people are worried that that's not being sufficiently addressed, which is why people have all been waiting for this MOF press conference over the weekend.
And what did you take from this?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? You look at the price action in the market, it's very mixed, right? So you see onshore kind of rallying, offshore obviously disappointed. So people are still kind of grappling with how to interpret it. And the way I look at it is it's kind of a mixed bag. So basically, people were looking for three things in the stimulus. They were looking for a numerical target of what type of stimulus amount. They were looking for composition of the stimulus, and people were really hoping for some new demand side support, especially for consumption. And then the third thing is people were looking for forward guidance. Any clarity of what else, it's already October, so you really need to look for forward guidance next year onwards. And what we got was kind of underwhelming on the first two.
Yep.
Basically, we didn't get a numerical target, and actually it was very disappointing. There was very little. A lot of the focus on the 4 incremental policy was more about local government. These are important problems: local government finances, property. But they only unveiled a little bit on student subsidies. Really nothing. There's no signs of a major kind of pivot towards new additional demand stimulus or consumption support. And then they talked about bank recapitalization. But then on the third thing, on the forward guidance, this is where I think things actually surprised a little bit more on the upside, because I think the finance minister Lan, and this was more reassuring than the NDRC press conference, he did say that central government has a lot of room for debt to increase the debt and the deficit. So a big source of contention in China is they've been stuck with this 3% deficit ceiling. So the fact that they're signaling more room is kind of a very reassuring sign. And then the other thing that was also kind of forward guidance was a little bit more encouraging is the fact that they were talking about potentially a largest ever kind of local government debt swap. And they're talking about using special bond quota to buy housing and land supply.
But it changed Hong Kong where you are, and everybody on our team there says it's changed dramatically. Do you see Beijing changing from a certitude of whatever the modern Marxist-Leninist state is? Do you see them amending their politics to jumpstart their nominal GDP and, frankly, to protect the yuan?
Look, I think there is some sign. I mean, obviously, we've had a lot of, state intervention, obviously, during the pandemic and the regulatory shocks and a lot of the sectors, which really impacted animal spirits. I think obviously the signaling from Xi now is trying to become much more friendly to private sector. But you know how it is, right? Once trust is lost, it takes a long time to regain. So although there's a lot of verbal rhetoric to kind of support private sector, level the playing field, he's trying to open up. I mean, people have been so scarred. It's like post-traumatic stress syndrome. It takes a while. So people are still very skeptical. So I think there is a verbal shift, but it's not yet sufficient really to turn around animal spirits. And then the problem is really that we haven't had any kind of significant kind of consumer household support. And so the deflationary pressures continue to linger. Real estate continues to be in a down cycle. So the counter-cyclical policy support, not to mention the lack of animal spirits, the trust deficit, which takes time, there's also a lack of counter-cyclical fiscal support to get people to feel confident about their job and income prospects. So you kind of have this kind of negative feedback loop, which they're trying to arrest. So I think since September 24, when we had the joint press conference with the PBOC and all there's clearly a sign that government realized they have to pivot. There's clearly a sign. It's just a question of trying to figure out, is it enough? And like I said, it's kind of a mixed bag what we got over the weekend. Because it seems like they're going to do something, but we don't have details. And even though the policy in the short term seems kind of incremental, hopefully we'll get some more clarity end of the month.
I want to see, I'm speaking for all the luxury retailers on Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue. They've seen the European tourists come back. They have not seen the Chinese. Why are the Chinese not traveling and spending? Because there's a lot of people out there would like to see the Chinese the folks be out there and spending and traveling.
Well, first of all, I think Xi Jinping's priority is not the luxury retailers in Europe. That's not the target. Look, I think there's been a lot of things that's happened, right? We clearly have significant precautionary savings behavior happening in China right now. I mean, household deposits are still so well above trend, even though they reopened, for a while now. So part of it is a lot of uncertainty about their income and job prospects. Housing, we're still, third year into housing down market. That's still, 2/3 of their household wealth. So that obviously, and there's also a little bit of policy push towards, there's a little bit more nationalism, more domestic travel, and that's the other factor.
But on a Schumpeter basis, let's bring it back to Harvard and we got to go. The bottom line is they have to inflict creative destruction upon a Chinese economy and from a Hayek standpoint, clear the market. Do you see any indication they can clear this market and move on?
Well, to be fair, what's happened in the real estate is quite dramatic, right? The fact that they preemptively pricked the bubble in 2021 to try to deflate the real estate is a sign they realized this was not where it's to go. And we are seeing, we saw massive defaults, so that is part of the destruction. And obviously they're creating new avenues of technology, but then the question is, we need something beyond kind of state-led industrial policy. We need private sector.
When do you and Citigroup suggest we're going to get it?
So right now, no, look, the strategy is we still have the ramification of the real estate hurting local governments. So obviously the priority now is to stabilize local government finances so they don't cut back a lot of public services and create a negative feedback loop. And they need to address the excess supply in housing because people are not going to be confident. You can't give, you give them, they're not, until housing stabilizes. So you need something on supply as well as demand to kind of reach an equilibrium, hopefully a little faster.
Johanna Chua, thank you so much. She is with Citigroup Hong Kong, head of Asia and Pacific Economics and Analysis. Thank you for those wonderful comments on Martin Feldstein. Last time I saw him, he was sitting in that chair. And it's great to have you here talking about Harvard. On this day of the Nobel Prize, again, MIT and Chicago take the trophy. Red and green on the screen. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris is ramping up her outreach to black men, pledging to provide outlets for economic security, as polls show Donald Trump is gaining support among black voters. Today, Harris proposed a new program for black entrepreneurs and others who faced barriers to accessing financing to provide loans to those starting businesses. Meanwhile, Trump called for raises and bonuses for border agents in an attempt to recruit 10,000 new people to secure the U.S.-Mexico border. Meanwhile, investigators in Riverside County, California, are looking into a man who was arrested outside of a Trump rally in Riverside County on Saturday. Trump had not yet arrived and no threats were made. Local charges, but no federal charges have been filed. The Secret Service says it's looking into the case. 49-year-old Vem Miller allegedly arrived at the rally with loaded guns in his car, fake license plates, passports, and driver's licenses under different names. When he reached an inner security checkpoint, he was stopped and arrested. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco says, in his opinion, his deputies may have stopped an assassination attempt.
If they are ever able to prove that it was assassination attempt, and I'm not saying they're going to be able to, but anything like that would be federal. The state crimes are the weapons charges that we arrested him for.
Sheriff Bianco. 3 U.S.-based academics will share the Nobel Prize in Economics for research into institutions and how they affect prosperity. Jacob Svensson, chair of the Committee for the Prize in Economic Sciences.
This year's laureates have pioneered new approaches, both empirical and theoretical, that have significantly advanced our understanding of global inequality.
Daron Acemoglu, Simon Johnson, both from MIT, along with James Robinson from the University of Chicago, will receive the $1.1 million award between them. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And we got to do justice to Michael Barr. We harassed him heavily with the Cleveland's Grand Slam tape. The Detroit Lions are not even dominant in the NFC North. Michael Barr, what happened to the NFC North where they just flat out own the high ground this season?
Well, you got to say, man, first of all, if you didn't know, we beat the Dallas Cowboys 40-9. That would be 40-9 and Dallas. And the team looks great.
Oh, come on. They're first in the league in points for.
Yeah.
Number 1 in the league. They play the Vikings. That's like a game I'll actually tune in. Vikings-Lions coming up it's a big deal. This
is a big division. This is a much tougher division, obviously, and our schedule obviously is tougher because of how well we did last season.
Yeah, Brockton, talk to Belsky's people. We got to get Brian Belsky in. He's our Vikings expert. He's been a loser for years. Brian's been a loser for years. We got to give him some love here. The Giants play tonight. Paul, would you care to comment?
The Jets play tonight.
Jets play tonight.
Yeah, the Giants lost last night, looking lackluster. But we'll see. Mr. Rogers, see if he can rally this team.
Yeah, they have a new coach, though, right?
Well, I guess.
It's just
a disaster over there.
Yeah, Arian said he just can't do it. He can't do head coach.
It all comes down to ownership. We all know it. We've seen it time and time again. Various franchises. It's all down to ownership.
Yeah, like the Tigers.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your sports report here on a Monday. With Michael Barr, and look for Bloomberg Business and Sports with Scarlett Fu, Damien Sassar, and Michael Barr as well. What do you see on the screen, Paul? What do you?
I see a little bit of a mix here, Tom. So market's trying to get some direction here. It's a big earnings week, and of course that'll be setting the agenda for I think probably the next several weeks. And that's the way it should be. We've got a Fed that's easing. Let's see how the profitability is incorporated.
Yeah, and 149.68, not to 150, but that's a big deal. Weaker yen. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Right now, we've got red and green on the screen after closing at a new all-time high. Right now, we have S&P futures up 0.1%, 5,870. Dow futures down 0.1%, 43,073. Nasdaq futures up 0.3%, 20,516. Treasuries trading closed for the holiday today. OPEC trimmed its forecast for oil demand growth this year and next for a third month in a row. We'll check in with commodities. We have Brent crude $77 a barrel, WTI crude $73 a barrel. We have spot gold lower, $2,654 an ounce. Casino stocks, they're under pressure after Macau elects a new leader. It warned against the role of gaming centers play in local economy. So now you have Las Vegas Sands, MGM Resorts down more than 1.5%, Wynn Resorts down more than 2%. And I thought this was interesting. Wall Street Journal reporting America has a new millionaire class. It's plumbers and HVAC entrepreneurs. Yeah, private equity firms.
All of them have bills out to Paul Sweeney.
I've been calling this for years. Who owns all these like bayfront homes on the Jersey Shore with these $500,000 boats and $2 million houses? It's the plumbers and all those guys. Because they have their own businesses and it's just,
and
I don't know where they all come from.
You have to pay it.
Exactly, you have to.
Breaks in you got to fix it.
That's the future, I'm telling you.
Seven-figure, eight-figure paydays.
Yes.
That's what they're getting.
Are you done?
Yes.
Thank you. Lisa Mateo there. She's getting back into the swing of things after a sabbatical. And of course, Bloomberg surveillance this morning, brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. There are no ticket charges. There are no conflicts of your interest at ibkr.com/RIA. Long ago and far away, somewhere in New Hampshire, buried in a building with black curtains, I sat with Greg Valliere, Sam Donaldson, and the late, great Ken Pruitt. And there was whatever the panic was, and I think it was the Democratic Party. Could have been the Republicans. That panic is there now. We're going to rip up the script with Greg Valliere of AGF and go right to it. Greg Valliere, I've got cab drivers asking me about Vice President Harris. What does she need to do to get the train back on the tracks?
Well, first of all, it's not too late, Tom. She still has a chance. She could still do well in the town hall meeting.
Nope, you had a little freeze there.
You had a little audio freeze there. I don't know. I think it's Columbus Day. It's their second one they show.
We're 4.5 years past the pandemic. Isn't everybody
Ken's
proficient on the whole
right
Zoom thing?
I don't know.
All right,
we'll see. Well, we don't have Greg, but to go to the point, I'm talking to everybody. They're coming up to me.
Sure.
What do you think? What do you think? I don't have an opinion, folks. But the bottom line is there's some serious issues here, Paul. You saw it on Saturday Night Live. They did the Family Feud thing. Yeah. And, one of the pundits said even Saturday Night Live is going after Vice President Harris to get it going. What do they do on this sort of half-holiday Monday for the 22-day
22 days, you're right, Tom.
To the elections?
I think we have Greg back, I believe. We do have Greg. Hey, Greg, so as Tom was asking here, what does Vice President Harris need to do to perhaps rekindle some of that momentum that she had when President Biden stepped down?
I think she has to get angrier. I think she's got to show almost a temper. I think that she's been too likable, and she's got to change that.
There we go.
We're going to leave it there. We're going to say goodbye to Greg Valliere here this morning.
We'll get it back later.
And get it back. Yeah, we'll get it back later. We'll get. We want a lot of Greg Valliere.
I think I think one of the bigger issues, Tom, is going to be not necessarily election day, but election eve, the next day, the day after that. How long is this going to go? I mean, are we going to have the balance of power folks on set for like 3 days straight?
Well, they told me, I wasn't involved in these conversations, folks, but I don't know which part of management came to my team, and they said I have to clear my schedule.
Sure.
And I'm cleared for 10 days before and after the election.
Yeah.
Like nothing. I can't do anything. And I'm like, okay. And the more and more we get closer, folks, I think, balance of power Tuesday night, 10 p.m., you're not going to know what's going on.
I don't know. I mean, but we didn't grow up with it this way, did we? I mean, I guess 19 90 or 2000?
We did not grow up this way, but then we saw it with Bush v. Gore, and then we saw it, of course, in 2016. It leads to a conversation of note. First of all, in the 9 o'clock hour, in less than 2 hours, Stephanie Flanders with the beleaguered Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the Labourite Sir Keir Starmer. It's been a challenging 100 days for Labour, to say the least, and that is preparation for tomorrow. At 11:30, Balance of Power with a 12 noon conversation, our John Micklethwaite in conversation with Mr. Trump. You're going to see that at the Economic Club of Chicago. And of course, Paul, Chicago, Illinois spins around everything from Walls's Minnesota to Wisconsin, and then over to the other blue wall states. You know, Ohio, I think we could say Ohio's Trump country. I think I'm not editorializing.
I'll ask Matt Miller. He's from the great state of Ohio.
But Pennsylvania, you know, it gets you over there. And so I think there's something about Micklethwaite going to Chicago to speak to Trump, and we'll do that tomorrow.
That'll be good.
12 noon. It'll be interesting to see the level of questions and the on-script answers.
Yeah, we've got those swing states, Tom. David Gurr, our own David Gurr, says Arizona is the state for him. That's where he's focusing his attention. So everybody's kind of got their swing state that they think is going to be really critical here, and then it feels like it's just going to go down to, literally a handful of votes. I just feel like there's going to be 42 people in an auditorium in Pennsylvania that's going to decide this.
You know, I saw a lot this weekend, folks, of undecided. We had a gentleman in the studio, very qualified, saying undecided was down to 3%. Others saying 6-8%, and now they're saying 3% as well. And Paul, I would say in the 22-day dash, it's about turnout. How does Trump get turnout? How does Harris get turnout? Frankly, you know, if I was with Mr. Trump in Chicago, that'd be my first question. How do you get turnout besides MAGA people showing up, you know, at this thing in Nevada and the rest?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody's drawing big crowds here. The advertising on television hasn't been too bad for us here in the tri-state area because we're not battleground states or districts, but you still see it on some of the national programming. You see the political advertising, but what I hear from folks in those swing states is just non-stop political ads. And I've heard from the television station group owners that own stations in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and so on, in Arizona, that the money's coming in hot and heavy. So that's, I guess, one of the ways these candidates continue to try to drive that turnout on Election Day.
Today is about technology and the Nobel Prize. In a minute here, I want to give you maybe one of the more current books here. This is from two of the three laureates, Daron Acemoglu and Simon Johnson, Power in Progress, Our 1,000-Year Struggle Over Technology and Prosperity. I'll be honest, I'll get it out on Twitter and LinkedIn. We're efforting Professor Johnson now. We'll see what we can do today or tomorrow to get Simon Johnson on. He's been a huge supporter of surveillance over the years. But I really want to say that's the go-to book, and I will bring that to your attention in the coming months as I can. Chapter 10, Democracy Breaks. Which gets your attention, to say the least.
We don't want to go there.
Particularly given election season. So that's the book. I'll get it out on Twitter and LinkedIn here in the coming hours. Power in Progress from MIT, from Acemoglu and Simon Johnson well. Paul, what do you see in media? I'm like, everything seems to be funneled through Amazon now. Well, Apple Plus is through Amazon.
I know. Coming up on Bloomberg Intelligence program, we're going to have Rich Greenfield on.
Oh, wonderful.
So we're just going to get, I just want to just say, hey, Rich, where are we here on this media? Are these traditional media companies going to survive? If so, how profitable are they going to be? Does anybody want to talk to Rich Greenfield, a media analyst?
Bravest sell-side analyst I've ever known. Here's a story in 30 seconds, folks. Greenfield's standing on a public street in New Jersey, off of whatever the corporation was, and he had written a sell-side note critical of the corporation. Down the road, the corporation blew up. He happened to be correct, but it's not about being right or wrong. And he was arrested on a public street in New Jersey, to say the least. And he called up, he had one call in jail. Who did Rich Greenfield call? John Bon Jovi. That's the way it worked.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news. U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza. The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Lisa Mateo is back. I'm Michael Barr, recovering from a Tigers loss. We say good morning on a holiday lengthened work week. It is Columbus Day, the huge parade today. It's like ginormous.
Yeah, all right.
I came in, all the fencing was up on Fifth Avenue. And,
all right, I'll go check it out.
You know, I turned on 59th Street, and there's like, you know, the walkways where you have to walk. It's a real celebration. I think we've got good weather today, don't we?
Yes, it's been phenomenal weather.
Phenomenal weekend, and you know, it's what
Tom,
it is. The bond market.
Saturday was a top 10 beach day of the entire year. Put it there. How about that, Lisa Mateo?
Well, she didn't know. She was on the Gulf
she's
Stream.
on, yeah, exactly. Coming back. She had a late night in
Guy's
L.A.
out, you know, some guy who was really important in birding in Central Parks got a shot of the comet coming into Newark. I'm like, that's not a comet. That's the Gulf Stream. I know that trail. Mateo coming in on the 450. We said good morning, and of course, we're really focused here. Bond market close. Equities give me futures up 9, a VIX 20.53. I'm watching yen, weaker yen, 149.65, a 150 yen. Jordan Rochester over at Mizuho with a brilliant note. He's in London, so it's not Columbus Day. And Jordan Rochester saying, you know, watch yen 150 to 155. None of that matters, folks. Here's the reality for the surveillance world. We're going to give you a vignette, an inside the surveillance look. We got a problem. It's chocolate-flavored puffed grain breakfast cereal.
Awesome.
And it's in the basement food court. Cocoa Puffs have invaded the basement just above Home Depot.
Yep.
And I mean, it borders on national crime that we don't have Cocoa Puffs, Lisa Mateo, on the 6th floor.
Horrible. It's horrible.
It's
I just cited them out.
It's good. I mean, everybody's got them now. Everybody's walking around with their Cocoa Puffs.
No, this is not kindergarten.
In the middle of the show, remember when they had the little paper box and you could cut the box open and put the milk in the box?
Of course.
Yep.
This is the show, folks. Paul and I are glued to our seats. Can't move. Lisa's strolling around the building, our world headquarters, looking for Cocoa Puffs. That's the way it rolls here. Again, futures up 9. From the Interactive Broker Studio on this Columbus Day, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Cocoa Puffs, Mateo.
Going cuckoo right now. Yes, we've got a mixed look here right now, red and green on the screen. Investors kind of weighing the impact of fresh Chinese stimulus. Also, a look ahead to major earnings this week. We're going to hear from the likes of United Airlines, Johnson & Johnson, Walgreens, Netflix. We'll also learn more about the health of the financial sector, reports from Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. So let's get to futures. We have S&P futures up 0.1% at 5,868. Dow futures down 0.1%, 43,067. NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 20,504. The bond market closed for the Columbus Day holiday. We'll move over to commodities. We have Brent crude $77 a barrel, WTI crude $74 a barrel. More bad news for Boeing. Yeah, the company cutting 10% of its workforce, about 17,000 people. Shares are down about 2%. And SpaceX getting one step closer to creating a rocket able to fly to the moon and Mars. It completed a trip to space with its Starship, including catching the vehicle's booster back at the launch pad. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
That is pretty cool.
Pretty cool, to say the least. Really it's a launch pad, folks, with two off the gantry, two things sticking out, and I guess they thread the needle and bring it down through one, and then bring it down through a second support.
Yep.
I have just a quick memory here. Movies that were somewhat secret of explorers blowing up on a launch pad in about 1960. There was, you know, that's how far we've come, I guess, is to say the least. Will Smith with us. Paul, why don't you bring this in, because you're like focused intently on high yield.
Yeah, I was looking at the IN function on the Bloomberg terminal. It just gives you a sense of kind of where the returns are across fixed income. And by far, the best performance this year on a year-to-date basis has been the U.S. Corporate High Yield Index, up 7.49%. Will Smith joins us. He's the director of U.S. High Yield Credit at AllianceBernstein. Hey, Will, talk to us about the high yield market here. Why have the returns been so strong relative to the rest of fixed income?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. High yield returns have been driven really by two factors this year. As we know, rates have rallied quite a bit year to date, especially the front end as the market starts to price in a more aggressive Fed cutting cycle. But much more importantly is that the economy's held in incredibly well. Companies are delevering, they're really reducing the amount of debt, they're increasing earnings, and as a result, spreads have gone a whole lot tighter. So high yield investors this year have looked at a really nice return when a lot of folks were concerned about a recession or a stagflation environment at the end of 23.
Have particular sectors, thank you, Ken. Have particular sectors done well? Look, Ken's shaking his head at me. Have particular sectors done well, Will, here? I mean, is there certain things that have just outperformed others in the high yield space?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing to look at is by ratings. So if you look at CCC bonds, so that's the worst quality high yield bonds in our market, they've had the best run by far, one of the best runs on record. And that's really driven by a few factors. One is, again, investors were concerned the economy was about to roll over. It didn't. Those companies are really exposed to growth, and growth has held in a whole lot better. I think it's the first big reason. The second big reason is that those balance sheets are the most indebted, meaning the Fed cutting cycle has possibly the biggest impact on those balance sheets. So suddenly those companies went from they can't access any capital markets, they have to default and restructure, and now they're doing okay.
What do you see for issuance forward? I find, you get through the election, and I guess we've got decent nominal GDP, and there's worry about jobs, but there's not. Soft landing, this and that. What are CFOs going to do? Are they going to issue?
I think it depends on the type of company. I think if you're looking at a sort of BB high rated credit where you don't necessarily need to buy growth, those companies are probably just going to continue to refinance debt. And that's what we've seen mostly this year. The big question mark are the companies that have to engineer some sort of growth. So those are secularly challenged industries, or that's the private equity community. And they've been largely on the sidelines for a few years here after a kind of historic 21, where there's a lot of deals underwritten with massive growth multiples. And those deals have really struggled as rates have moved a lot higher. If those private equity sponsors start to come back, if CFOs start to try to buy growth, that could change the narrative. But so far, we haven't seen much of it.
Is your job harder because of the boom in private credit?
Is it harder? I think the answer is probably yes. Now, the reason why is because the supply of our space.
Wait. On a Monday, do we allow answers like probably. Yes? I'm busting your chops, Will. Continue.
I love it, Tom.
This is a whole issue, folks, because 6 people in the general counsel's office of AB are listening to this interview, ready to move the trap door on Will Smith. Will, probably yes. Tell me about the challenge of private credit.
The biggest challenge is that they're taking a lot of supply. So our market generally would like to see some growth, call it like 5 to 7% per year of amount of debt, because that gives us a bigger opportunity set. And as we're raising capital from investors, we're able to put that to work. Now, private credit is soaking up a lot of that supply. You've seen private credit has grown immensely over the last decade, and the high yield market has almost actually shrunk over the last 4 or 5 years. Now, why it's maybe a good thing on the other side is that it's a whole lot of capital to help companies that potentially need it. And we've seen that this year. That's probably another narrative going back to those CCC bonds that have worked really well. There's a lot of capital in private credit that is looking at these assets and saying, I'd love to extend some credit to these companies because they look great and the returns look pretty solid to me. So it's a push and pull.
So, I mean, just to follow Tom's question, Will, I mean, back in the day, I sold a ton of high yield debt for my media clients. When you hear from issuers, what is their decision tree about, do I go to the public high yield markets versus the private credit? Is it simply just the economic terms on the term sheet?
The biggest reason we've heard from company CFOs and also private equity sponsors is just the speed of execution. Private credit comes to a deal and they have a checkbook ready to go and they can write that check. Now, if you go to a bank and you syndicate a deal, you're taking more time and you're also potentially taking some market risk because banks will not sit on that risk and guarantee a rate. They're waiting for the market to price it, and that might be a multiple month period. Now, one of the things that I think is very important for investors to think through, though, is that private credit was paying you a lot for the illiquidity of that asset class for a long time. But there's been so much competition and so much capital raised. It's not abundantly clear to us that you're actually earning all that much like-for-like credit risk now.
Will, got to leave it there. Will Smith from Nashville with Alliance Bernstein. Thank you so much. We'll get you back on soon. Red and green on the screen. Futures up 9. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, Lisa, thank you very much. A Hezbollah drone attack on a northern Israeli base has left 4 soldiers dead and more than 60 others wounded. That's despite Israel's ground campaign in southern Lebanon aimed at degrading the Iran-backed militia. Bloomberg's Johanna Chua has more from Dubai.
This is actually the deadliest strike that Hezbollah has launched since the beginning of that ground incursion that you mentioned into Lebanon. But Hezbollah announced this morning that they were behind these series of attacks and that they were not going to cease launching these attacks unless Israel pulled back from the Lebanese border. They also say that they had retaliated in response to a deadly airstrike in central Beirut last week that killed more than 20 people.
Bloomberg's Johanna Chua in Dubai. 3 weeks out from Election Day, former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are both heading to must-win Pennsylvania today as the new poll shows the presidential race narrowing. Harris has used an appearance before a largely black church audience in battleground North Carolina to call out Trump for spreading misinformation about the federal government's hurricane response. Meantime, Trump called for raises and bonuses for border agents in an attempt to recruit 10,000 new people to secure the U.S.-Mexico border. The 2024 Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded this morning. Jacob Svensson, chair of the Committee for the Prize in Economic Sciences, says the prize was awarded to 3 experts for research into differences in prosperity between nations.
Thanks to Daron Acemoglu, Simon Johnson, and James Robinson's groundbreaking research, we have a much deeper understanding of the root causes of why countries fail or succeed.
Acemoglu and Johnson are from MIT, and Robinson is with the University of Chicago. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Okay, the New York Yankees, let's do it. Let's start the guy who gave up the most homers in baseball this year. Can Carlos Rodon get it done? I mean, I loved him with the Giants. What do you think, Paul?
I think so. I mean, he does give up a lot of home runs in the Cleveland Guardians.
The Clevelands can do that.
They hit a lot of home runs, so I don't know. But, I mean, you could have thrown a right-hander, I guess, as well. Clark Schmidt maybe. But we'll see. I mean, this is going to be, I think, a pretty good series. And it's just a question in my mind is if the big Yankee guys, what a Judge and Soto and all. Soto
do you assume Soto is just here for 1 year? Like he's gone?
I don't know. I don't know.
Michael?
I don't know about that. I'm with Paul. I mean, because, listen, if they have success and go all the way, why would you go anywhere?
Right. Well, I say that about a lot of people, but about the Yankees. Why would you ever leave the Yankees because it's the Yankees? But I think a lot of these players, they just don't care as much as we do about the Yankees. They're just like, whoever pays me the most, that's where I'll go. Which is okay.
It was 9-love, the Dodgers.
Yeah, that was tough.
Haley Koufax was there. You should see her seats. They're like 4 rows up. She's there with all the beautiful people.
Okay.
All wearing really expensive sunglasses. Dodgers Mets. They play again?
This afternoon.
This afternoon? Thank you, Michael Barr. It's good to know that. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have futures mixed after two of Wall Street's main indexes set new records, talking about the Dow and the S&P. Right now, we'll check in with S&P futures, up 0.1%, 5,870. Dow futures down 0.1%, 43,072. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.3% at 20,515. Treasury trading closed for the holiday today. We have a few stocks on the move. Caterpillar down nearly 2% after being downgraded to underweight by Morgan Stanley. Cyber software company SentinelOne up more than 5%. Piper Sandler raised the company to overweight from neutral. And finally, sources telling Bloomberg that Elliott Investment, it's informed Southwest Airlines it's requesting a special shareholder meeting in December. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Can't say enough about Bloomberg News Now. This is your easiest subscription to a podcast besides YouTube, Bloomberg Podcast, to see the Paul Sweeney Show. But other than that, it's really great. Lisa, they update it even more than every hour if there's a lot of news, right?
Of course, breaking news. Yeah, they're always updating it, but it's with under 5 minutes, so it's fast, it's quick, it's to the point.
It's what my kids want. They're like, Dad, we want to be like you, where you look at the news all day, except we want to do it in 4.5 minutes.
It's all about short.
So that's sort of, it's like a generational thing. Bloomberg News Now, subscribe to that as you can. This is a joy. Sri Kajagovindan with us right now with Aberdeen Investments here on the state of our economics. Sri, the big misguess of the last 18 months has been the growthiness of the United States. Does it continue or will it end? This growth surge, real and nominal GDP that we've seen?
I think that's a very good point that you make. The US growth picture is really a key focus for investors. And what we're seeing is a bit of a transatlantic divergence, which is worth noting. Nonetheless, we have had some very good data from the US in terms of payrolls, particularly the recent payrolls were much stronger than consensus. We saw some upward revisions. However, we are seeing slower growth. The trend is for a slight weakening in the labor market. If we look beyond that payrolls data, we do see some underlying indicators showing a weakness in terms of picking up of layoffs are starting to increase. Consumer sentiment with regards to the labor market is starting to decelerate. So yes, growth is strong, but it is on a downward trajectory there. And that's something the Fed will have to keep an eye on.
In Aberdeen, is it a growth view forward or a value defensive view forward?
Well, I think a lot really depends actually on the election outlook as well. So we do need to consider that. We are looking for, at the moment in terms of the election, it is still a 50-50. And I think as we get closer to the election, then we'll start to see some real divergences in equity markets, depending on not just who wins, but in terms of also whether we have a split Congress or a clean sweep in either direction. So then we need to look at the mix of policies that are likely or expected. I think those market movements will be quite swift as well. So really that growth and value story will be quite conditional upon what happens in November and then the trends from there on.
Sri, what did you make of the news coming out of China over the weekend? Was it enough fiscal stimulus for that economy, or do they need to do more, do you think?
I think there was a lot of speculation going into this weekend ahead of that meeting or the press conference from the Ministry of Finance. There were some media speculation that could be stimulus to the tune of like a trillion RMB. Now that didn't actually materialize, but the Ministry of Finance did keep open the door for further stimulus in future. So it could be seen as a bit of a disappointment. You can see the volatility in the Shanghai Composite. Chinese equities are starting to really sort of second guess what the next steps are. But what we have seen some stimulus, some support for students, But what was lacking was really the support for the consumers. We didn't see any fiscal transfers for households, and that was a bit of a disappointment there. But the local government bond issuance and the was it 400 billion there, RMB, it's helpful, but it's still too small.
Take your economics over to a vector of inflation, and let's call it disinflation. I understand deflationary worries in China, but do you just say out to 25, out to 2026, there's a disinflation tendency in place?
I think, as you highlight, we need to think about the different regions. I think if you look at the economies in the West, like US, Europe, UK, despite some of the bumpy path that we've seen, slightly hotter inflation print potentially this week for core PCE in the US, despite all of that, the trend is very much for disinflation, going back towards target across US, Europe, and UK. Obviously, in some other economies, particularly in China, as you mentioned, this morning, this week, the data has been quite a little bit disappointing there. We've got core inflation closer to like 0.1% year on year, very much flat, really flirting with deflation going forward. But I think some of the stimulus that we've seen from China should help support that. I think they're very wary of this deflationary threat. And I think some of the comparisons with Japan back in the 90s, 2000s, I think that could be, mistaken, because we are seeing this sort of support, albeit step by step, and they've left the door open, but they seem very aware of, staying out of that deflation risk.
Sri, thank you so much. Sri Kochagovindan at Aberdeen with us today, of course, with Barclays for years. Love to see her up at Aberdeen. Asset managers, always forever from Edinburgh.
Yep.
I mean, it's just,
exactly.
The way they roll. Futures up 10. They advanced. Dow's giving me what's the issue with the Dow? Is it Boeing?
Oh, I don't know.
There's got to be one stock,
one name holding it down. But again, kind of mixed red and green out there on the screen here, Tom. Again, the bond market closed, so there's nothing to talk about there. WTI crude oil off about 2% here, $74 a barrel. Gold off just slightly, and from Matt Miller, Bitcoin never sleeps, up 3.25%.
First thing I noticed today. Can you believe the first thing I looked at on the Bloomberg Launchpad was BitDog today?
It's where you got to go, I guess, with the bond market closed.
We're at 2,000, right? Yeah, it's up 2,000, 65,000 rounded up.
Sure.
And I think that's sort of correlated with a bull market tone.
It is. I feel like it's a risk asset. That's how it's not a store value to me. It's always just kind of a risk asset like stocks.
Where's the exuberance out there? I get it in multiples, and the bulls say earnings are going to come up, the denominator's going to come up, and multiples will be tamed, and the gloom crew says, forget it. Multiples are nuts.
Yeah, multiples. I mean, you look at it, what some of the strategists are saying, 21 times forward earnings is on the high end. But if you pull out some of the, the Mag 7, it's closer to 17, 18, a little bit better, maybe if that's how you want to play it. But the earnings certainly need to come through. We've got the Fed kind of there as a little bit of a backstop, I guess, with that 50 basis point cut and expectations that they'll continue to cut. That plus presumably good double-digit earnings growth, maybe that's enough.
I want to talk about this because everybody's got a different style. And the style of Simon Johnson, and particularly Daron Acemoglu, writing with Simon Johnson and writing with James A. Robinson of Chicago, all three winning the Nobel Prize today, is prodigious efforts on books. Mm-hmm. Like Simon Johnson, Paul, had the single best short read on the crisis of 2007 of anybody I know. I'll get the book. It's not worth reading now, folks. It's like time has passed on. But I've said this many times publicly. Simon just killed that. And then Daron had out like a 1,000-page tome, Why Nations Fail, which everybody read or they walked around with it and said, well, I'm going to read it someday, but they never did. But Why Nations Fail had a big impact. But the big one to me was Acemoglu and Robinson, The Narrow Corridor. It's really when they started looking at technology.
Right.
And that's where we are now. What does NVIDIA do to our economy? What does it do to our nation?
Yep, absolutely. I know. And a lot of folks, kind of Gene Munster, Tom, put it on a scale as AI is as important as electricity. I mean, that's how Gene
I
Munster puts
missed
it.
that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Speaking of electricity, we'll continue. Bloomberg surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've still got red and green on the screen, and this is after the Dow and S&P kind of rewrote the record books. Checking in with them now, we've got S&P futures up about 0.1%, 5,869. We have Dow futures down 0.1% at 43,065. NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, 20,515. The bond market closed for the Columbus Day holiday today. The economic calendar, quiet for today. Tomorrow, though, we have a report on manufacturing. Wednesday, a read on import prices. Thursday, retail sales, initial jobless claims, and we'll round off the week with housing starts and building permits. Heading over to currencies, the dollar stronger. Japanese yen weaker at 149.77 against the dollar. Euro weaker. British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin up 3% at just about 65,000. Crypto-linked companies rallying. MicroStrategy, CleanSpark up more than 5%. Marathon Digital up more than 4%. And you'll soon be paying the regular price for your Starbucks run. The Wall Street Journal says the coffee chain scaling back promotions and discounts under its new CEO. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
What's the thing Afterthought brings home? A pumpkin spice
latte?
Latte.
Oh, sure. That's the thing.
Are they getting rid of those? That's un-American.
No, that's just, I mean, they bring those things out like right after Labor Day.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
great.
a treat.
I mean, they're not taking away the pumpkin spice latte.
No.
Retail sales this week is a big deal. I'll be looking for that, I believe, on 17. We'll see that. Our economic indicators, what we do here, including tomorrow, brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio. Small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology. We thank Commonwealth for their support. This is a joy and perfectly timed. We're celebrating the Nobel Prize in Economics today, and someone like Gilles Mouek is hugely qualified to speak on this. All of his work, including Academics Institut d'études politiques in Paris a number of years ago. Gilles Mouek is with AXA. Gilles, to look at the technology and prosperity from it that the Nobel laureates have studied, why is Europe behind the United States?
Good question. And we have not always been behind, actually. There was a time in the 70s, in the 80s, when Europe was actually catching up with the US, and we were almost on par in terms of productivity per hour in the early 80s, if I remember correctly, and we lost ground. Many reasons for that. We missed a few revolutions. We were late in the IT revolution. We didn't have enough hardware producers in particular, and then software producers. We missed a bit the biotech revolution as well. Generally speaking, maybe we have a general, business environment that is not necessarily as conducive as it is in the US towards innovation.
No, but I look at this, and it's just simply an abhorrence of capital gain, that if you make capital gain, if you do investment in gain, you're punished more in France than you are in Kentucky. I mean, is it just that simple?
No, I don't think it's that simple. I think Europe has been doing really well on incremental technological process. progress. Sorry, quite good on that. For instance, in the car industry, the German car industry has been very often on the technological frontier, and they've been able to invest massively. There was no major difference with the US. Where we seem to be less good than the US, it's on getting to the new thing, to the new sector, to the new industry, which the US has been doing much better than we have the last 50, 60 years. So incrementals are fine, but it's the revolution, so to speak, the leaps, which are wanting in Europe. And we don't have a great explanation for that. Daron Acemoglu probably has a few, but maybe again, the business environment in general, I think it's something we need to think about, because since the IRA in the US, there is a temptation in Europe to look at our gap with the US only in terms of what the government funding looks like, or in terms of subsidies, state aid, just like the US has been doing over the last few years. It's probably part of the answer, but I think it's not all of the answer. And thinking about how our labor market could be made more flexible, for instance, that would still help, I think, getting us through.
Right. And Paul, this weekend, there was an article, I'm going to give the FT credit, I frankly can't remember, in the Blur, but once again, Paris is losing bankers, finance people. They're 6'5", blue-eyed. They're losing finance people back to London because of their tax law.
Yeah, I mean, Brexit was served that up on a silver plate, I would think. Gilles, talk to us about the European Union, the economic stance. How is the economy in the European Union, and how is the EU, the ECB, kind of thinking about the European Union's economy?
I think we are in a state of mediocrity. I would say at the moment there's nothing catastrophic. I mean, we're not in a recession, but we have a number of key member states which are not very far from recession, and Germany has been in and out of quarterly contractions. I think one of our issues right now is that our consumers basically save too much. That's still a big difference with the US in particular. If you look at the savings ratio in all four biggest economies in the Eurozone, the savings ratio today is higher than it was before the pandemic.
Gilles Moec now, folks, in Paris, looking across the channel on the Euro train into Labour United Kingdom. Gilles Moec or Stephanie Flanders within the hour will speak with Sir Keir Starmer. It's been a difficult 100 days, all can agree, for Labour. From where you sit, what do they need to do to give hope to the United Kingdom economy?
Well, the issue is that Keir Starmer probably was not elected on hope. He did not campaign really on a very optimistic narrative. He campaigned on seriousness, and obviously it's very hard to make people dream when you campaign and you win on seriousness. So my guess is that the next step is to get the budget through. There've been promising, sweat and tears for everyone in the UK, that there would not be any space for any fiscal gift. My guess is that they've been so, severe in their pre-presentation of the budget, is that my guess is that actually people look at the budget and think, well, it's not so bad. There's a measure of austerity, but the main big items of tax in particular are not going to be hiked for 2025. You could then see that being something, but for me, really the big issue in the UK, it's not so much what the government is going to do, it's what the Bank of England is going to do. And if we have a series of rate cuts, as I expect for the end of this year and 2025, very quickly you will see optimism in the UK rise again, because it's an economy which is very sensitive to changes in interest rates.
So, Gilles, talk to us about the UK economy and its trade posture now with various parts of Europe post-Brexit. How are things kind of shaking out here? Is everybody finding a new way here?
No, I think things are still in a state of flux, if anything, because we still don't have the sort of final arrangement. Basically, there is still a lack of precision on the UK side, in particular, on how they're going to do things. Everyone is kind of hoping on a better trade relationship between the UK and the EU. But from what we understand, the kind of red lines that the British government and the EU have put on the table in those new negotiations are still quite daunting. So My best guess is that we've probably seen the worst in terms of trade relationship between the UK and Europe about 2-3 years ago. Things are currently still in a state of flux. They are going to improve, I would say, gradually. But as long as the UK still doesn't want to reopen the issue, for instance, of having a customs union with the EU, I'm not even talking about rejoining the EU. That's still taboo here in the conversation. But simply having a customs union, which I think would still be in line and respectful of the decision of the British electorate to leave the EU. As long as we don't go there, it's not going to be massive, binary progress.
Gilles, thank you so much. Gilles Moek with AXA in Paris, the large insurance combine. Thank you so much, particularly those comments on Sir Keir Starmer. We'll talk about that in a moment. Red and green in the screen, the VIX 20.56 bond market. Close is Columbus Day. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Republican nominee Donald Trump called for raises and bonuses for border agents in an attempt to recruit 10,000 new people to secure the U.S.-Mexico border. Trump at a rally in Prescott Valley, Arizona, says if elected in November, he will call on Congress to pass a 10% pay increase for Border Patrol agents and approve a $10,000 retention and signing bonuses. He also took a swipe at his opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris.
If Kamala gets 4 more years, the entire country will be turned into a migrant camp, and that's what's happening. Millions and millions of people.
Vice President Harris, meanwhile, has assailed Trump for his role in killing a bipartisan immigration bill that would have addressed the border crisis and has said she would sign it into law if it came to her desk. Harris spent the weekend in North Carolina where she packed aid boxes for hurricane victims and spoke at a rally outside of Raleigh in Greenville Sunday. After releasing her medical records over the weekend, Harris mentioned again that Donald Trump has yet to release his records this election cycle.
It makes you wonder, why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question, are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable?
Today, Harris proposed a new program for black entrepreneurs and others who have faced barriers to accessing financing to provide loans to those starting businesses. A major milestone for SpaceX, one of the boosters on its Starship rocket successfully flew back to the launch site and was caught by a giant metal arm, 2 of them, I guess, or what the company calls chopsticks.
It's pretty much right overhead of us, and we can see it starting to come down.
The historic breakthrough for the world's most powerful rocket now puts SpaceX one step closer to making Starship a completely reusable rocket, something no one has ever done before. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney, in 45 minutes, we've got Sir Keir Starmer in conversation with our Stephanie Flanders at Guildhall. Long ago and far away, I did a wonderful evening at Guildhall with Alistair Darling, who at the time was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And, I got there early because of security and all that. I'm walking around and I realize, in America, like the Reagan building, you go, oh, that was 2003. Right. Guildhall started in the 15th century.
Oh, boy.
Like 1411. Yep. I'm down in the crypt underneath. I don't know if there's bodies down there, but it's a spectacular. This is the big difference between London and the United States. It's spectacularly old. It was affected by the Great Fire. It was affected by Luftwaffe bombing in World War II. And you drive by it near Aldrich, near London School of Economics. You drive by it, and it's this sort of Gothic, fancy thing. Steph Flanders to come from Guildhall.
That'll be perfect setting.
Here in 45 minutes with Sir Keir Starmer. Looking forward to that. And tomorrow, John Micklethwait with Mr. Trump in Chicago, 12 noonish. We'll tell you a lot more about that tomorrow. And there's Axios, Mike Allen writing it up this morning for the first time, an essay on what if it's a Trump sweep?
Yeah.
Senate, House, and Mr. Trump. So it's going to be, to be direct, it's a timely conversation.
It is a timely conversation. I mean, we're just so close to the election here, Tom. And
22
again,
days.
22 days, and the experts keep telling us too close to call, and it's going to come down to literally a handful of votes, and we probably won't know, as we typically do on the evening of Election Day. That may not be the case this time.
The conversation with Bloomberg Surveillance and all of Bloomberg, Sir Keir Starmer in 40 minutes, and then Donald Trump tomorrow with John Micklethwait in Chicago. Futures advance up 8, up 10, up 12. Is anybody working today? Up 12?
We're here. We're here. No traffic on driving up today from the Jersey Shore.
I noticed that. I took the Sikorsky today. It was great.
Of course. Beautiful.
Central Park, the leaves changed in the autumnal glow. From New York City, please stay with us. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures mixed, and this is after closing at a new all-time high. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%, 5,871. Dow futures down 0.1%, 43,067. NASDAQ futures up 0.3% at 20,521. Treasuries trading closed for the holiday today. OPEC trimmed its forecast for oil demand growth this year and next for a third month in a row. We'll check in with Brent crude right now, $77 a barrel. We have WTI crude $73 a barrel. Casino stocks really under pressure after Macau elects a new leader. It's warned against the role that gaming centers play in the local economy. So you have Las Vegas Sands down more than 1.5%, Wynn Resorts down more than 1%. And you may not have asked for it, but Doritos has opened its first ever restaurant. Yes, it's Doritos After Dark inside Los Angeles Crypto.com arena. Margaritas, veggie dumplings, ice cream.
Oh, right up your alley.
With Doritos twist. I'll pass. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciated, Lisa, this morning. Futures advance up 13. We're going to go now on the election to Heidi Crebo-Rediker, one of the great thinkers at the Council on Foreign Relations. Shout out Richard Haas the other day. We got a huge response to Ambassador Haas's interview. And we're doing this with Heidi as we're going back and forth with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There is a 10 a.m. press conference of Acemoglu and Johnson on the Nobel Prize. We're trying to get Professor Johnson here now. We'll see how it goes. Heidi's being a trooper on this at this moment of economics. Heidi, all of a sudden the election's changed. What's changed?
So I think what's changed is that we are in such a dead heat right now. We're neck and neck with two candidates, and we have Donald Trump taking the lead in polls on foreign policy and economics. You have Harris taking the lead in polls on issues of abortion and sort of trustworthiness, and I think that we are. I'm not so sure I agree that we're looking at a red sweep come November, but you never know. That might just happen. But I think you've got to at least give the potential that happens, and there are massive consequences if you do have a red sweep. No checks and balances then.
Heidi, talk to us about one of the key issues for this election, which is immigration. There's pros and cons here, I guess, to this immigration. A lot of folks are highlighting some of the economic benefits to immigration in terms of a younger workforce, and actually these folks are spending money and all that kind of thing. How do you think it should be framed out?
So when I talk about immigration, it's legal immigration, and I think it's important that people that people understand. From a macro perspective, deporting millions of people from the United States right now would be, in addition to the tariff proposals that Trump has on the table, a 1-2 punch. That would actually further fuel inflation. So we do have a relatively tight labor market still, 4.1% unemployment. We lose workers and we lose consumers at the same time. And we have a different demographic situation than when Trump was last president. America's getting older and we actually need immigration. If it were just the policy of illegal immigration and getting tougher on the border, which I think both of them, both candidates are looking to do. I don't think that Trump, if you hear what he's saying, he doesn't seem to be a fan of legal immigration, and that's where I think that's a big problem. Not only for our workforce, but also immigrants come with innovation. You look at the CEO and co-founder of NVIDIA. You look at the head of Google, Sergey Brin, who co-founded Google. Jerry Yang from Yahoo, and even Elon Musk. He came here courtesy of South Africa and Canada, so he's an immigrant too.
Heidi, we want to get you back on soon. We've got to go to a Nobel Prize winner, Heidi Crebo-Rediker.
Say hi.
Thank you so much. And Heidi says, say hi to Simon Johnson. I really can't say enough about this, folks. His book on the crisis of 2007, 13 Bankers. It was my book of the year. It is the definitive short read on the crater that we all lived through in 07, 08. He, of course, has gone on to extraordinary academics at MIT on technology and growth. The new book is Power and Progress, newly minted Nobel Prize winner, Simon Johnson. Simon, when Rudy Dornbush was beating you to death at MIT years ago, do you think Dornbush ever would have thought young Johnson, the mouthy one from the United Kingdom, would win a Nobel Prize?
No, I'm pretty sure he would be just as surprised as I am today, Tom.
It's just wonderful. Simon Johnson, let's talk about the why of this Nobel Prize with James Robinson of Chicago and, of course, Daron and you over at MIT. There's a presser at 10 a.m., folks. Simon Johnson, why should we study, fear, or enjoy our modern technology?
I think technology drives everything, Tom. You're well aware of that. And the question is, whose technology? Who has what priority? What's their vision? Is it an inclusive vision, or is it a vision in which only a few people have good jobs and everybody else is really scrambling? That's been super important over the last 250 years. We've had some good episodes and some really bad ones. And I think it's all in play again with artificial intelligence.
In play with this, Simon Johnson, is this election. I mentioned this the other day. It parallels 1840, 1850. There's almost a Luddite part of America that is afraid of the consequences of technology. What is the Acemoglu Johnson-Robinson prescription?
Well, Daron and Jim should speak for themselves. But my view, Tom, is that technology has hurt people. We've had excessive automation in the past 40 years. We've not generated enough new good jobs, so jobs where you actually get paid good money and you can live well. And we've got to do better on that. I think that that's really a fundamental driving importance, irrespective of the election outcome. Where are the good jobs going to come from? And can we keep pace with or get ahead of automation? Because automation is going to happen like it or not. So you really got to work a lot harder to generate more science, more technology, deploy that, commercialize that, scale that up, and generate more good jobs all across the country. Can be done, but it's a top priority, and I think it needs to be elevated as a priority right now.
All right, so Simon, with your two colleagues and your work here, I mean, it just raises a question which is so relevant even today, discerning why some countries are rich and some much poorer. How should we think about that big picture question these days?
Well, I suggest we think about it in two ways. One is the sort of deep history and recognize that we've all got these legacies that we're living with. And some of these legacies, particularly if you were colonized in a harsh way by the Europeans, that's a very tough legacy to overcome. But the second thing is, there's no predestination. It's all about the choices that you make, including technology that we just talked about if you're in the United States. But around the world, I would point to corruption. I mean, corruption's been, as you guys know, talked about a lot over the past 30, 40 years. But what do we have? We still have immense amounts of corruption. And there's two sides to that. There's the people who pay the bribes and the people who take the bribes. And that's a big part of what holds a lot of countries deeply in the poverty that you see today.
So what can institutions do? I mean, this is, I'm going to go back to Douglas North and his seminal work at Washington University in St. Louis. Professor Johnson, what do our institutions need to improve on to help the have-nots of technology? What is your IMF, where you served, what does it need to do?
Oh, well, I was at the IMF a long time ago, as you know, so I'm not going to speak to their current policies and stance. But I think that the key thing, and it may just sound like a rhetorical device, Tom, but it's real, is focus on inclusive prosperity. How are you getting more good jobs created for more people, and make sure they can access those jobs, make sure they have the skills, make sure they're empowered themselves, and they recognize that. So the bumper sticker for me out of all of this is more good jobs.
Sloan 101, come on, Simon, let's do it. Simon Johnson on tariffs.
Oh, and look, if you want to blow up the world and the world trading system and really damage poorer Americans, slap a massive tariff on all the imports. Right. Because as you know, poorer Americans spend a lot on things that have imported content. So massive tariff war, terrible idea.
Right. Simon, one more question. We want to get you on your day. Huge press commitments now in this important press conference with Daron Acemoglu scheduled at 10 a.m. Circling in all this academics is Olivier Blanchard. Tell us what Olivier did for MIT.
Oh, I think Olivier Blanchard is one of the greatest economists of this or any generation. And his presence and his toughness and his rigor has been present throughout my career. And I started at MIT as a grad student in September 1985. So I've been 39 years on and off with the Institute. So Olivier Blanchard is one of the modern greats, absolutely.
Simon Johnson, congratulations. Simon Johnson, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I can't say enough, Paul, how this started. The foundation for me, and others will correct me, is back to 1956-57 and Robert Solow inventing how this religion of what is growth? How does Bloomberg grow? How does, we talked to Alliance Bernstein earlier. How do they grow? How does Colgate-Palmolive grow? What is growth? And that started the crucible of that. Yep. Was MIT 56-57.
Yep, and here we go. And so we're thinking about, I'm just looking at the work here, some of the Bloomberg News reporting on these three economists talking about income inequality, at the massive level that you see across the globe, and some of their work.
And in America.
Yeah.
In America, that's what this election's about. There's two Americas. John Edwards on a lawn in Louisiana talked about it. There's two Americas out there, and these guys are thinking as hard as they can, including their new book, to Power and Progress, to include more people in technology. We thank Simon Johnson and his people. Special thanks to David Gura that really put this interview
that was good.
Together today.
Team effort today.
Gura, I thought, was off today. I don't.
Still maybe. I don't know.
We'll have to see.
You never know with that guy.
That
so
well.
Smooth.
Again, congratulations to these three winners, MIT and Chicago, on the Nobel Prize. It's a bull market rally. Paul, we keep talking. We're up 9, up 8. Now we're up 14 on futures. SPX up 0.4%. What an odd day to trade equities with the bond market.
Yeah, we say this every year. Who's in charge of this discussion? Exactly. I'm blaming Bob. I think
if Gura can get Simon Johnson, can Gura get us a day off?
Right. Exactly.
Because the bond market's closed and equities are open.
Exactly. These bond market guys they're smart. But we got the S&P futures up 13, the Dow off 62, NASDAQ showing some growth here. Yeah, dollar stronger, and crude oil off about 2% here, just under $74 a barrel now, Tom, for WTI crude.
Amrita Sen, scheduled to be with us here on oil. I'm still distracted at the top of the next hour. we're not going to talk about Sir Keir Starmer or yen at 150. We got a link in here, Cocoa Puffs and Doritos, because that's where Mateo is today.
Yep, exactly. That's where her reporting takes us.
It is Columbus Day, which means you play Bobby Daron.
Start to spread fancy gloves, though, where's old Maggie Heath, babe? So there's never a trace of red. Now on the sidewalk, ooh, Sunday morning, lies a body just oozing life. And someone sneaking round the corner. Could that someone be Mac the Knife?
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, and Giuseppe's father's with us. Everybody's here today.
I know. Everybody's working here.
I went to Giuseppe's father. I said, can you get Simon Johnson?
Boom, he's on.
Boom, just like that.
Just like that.
Just thrilled that we could speak to the Nobel laureate today of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Good morning, 92.9 FM across all of New England. It's a huge day for all of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, going back to Stan Fisher and Olivier Blanchard and the rest. He said the rigor there.
They do really math there, I think, right? They do math?
They do math
okay.
there. They lead. They don't lead with math. Like Chicago leads with micro.
Okay.
The answer in Chicago, macroeconomics is to study more micro. That's a joke.
Right.
And MIT's got a mathiness to it, but it really goes back to the loss of Rudy Dornbush way too early, and as Simon said, of Olivier Blanchard and others, just the rigor of their thinking at a very high PhD level. It's just a real celebration today. We've got a great conversation this hour. Stephanie Flanders in London with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Look for that in 30 minutes. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, brought to you by BAM Mutual. They insure municipal bonds that finance essential infrastructure and provide guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Be part of the Building America. Invest in BAM insured bonds. Be part of Building America. Invest in BAM, B-A-M, BAM insured bonds.
Lisa, no.
No?
No.
Doesn't do it like you? BAM.
See, there's a Matt Miller reading of the BAM billboard that lives on in infamy. He screams the word BAM that I think they like, actually. So
what's he do?
He just screams BAM.
Bam.
And it just wakes you up no matter where you are.
It was a concept, and then it was like, oh, it works. Congratulations to BAM. They've really done a great job on this. From the Interactive Broker Studios of Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You've got it. We've got red and green on the screen. Investors looking ahead to major earnings this week. It includes the likes of United Airlines, Johnson & Johnson, Walgreens, Netflix. We'll also hear about the health of the financial sector with reports from Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. Right now, let's get to futures. NASDAQ futures up about 0.4%, 20,549. Dow futures down 0.1%, 43,091. S&P futures up 0.2% at 5,875. Bond market closed for the Columbus Day holiday today. We'll head over to commodities where we have Brent crude down about 2% at $77 a barrel. WTI crude $73 a barrel. Companies making news, it's Boeing. Shares down about 1.5% after saying it'll record $5 billion of charges and cut about 10% of its workforce, or 17,000 people. And sources telling Bloomberg, Elliott Investment informed Southwest Airlines that it's requesting a special shareholder meeting in December. And finally, Renault unveiled a new affordable EV at the Paris Auto Show. It's called the R4 E-Tech. Expected to cost just under $39,000, a driving range of 249 miles. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. When we were kids, it was Renault. I don't know what happened. Nothing used to upset Ken Pruitt more than I'd say Porsche.
Oh, boy.
He'd go absolutely mental. Yeah. Porsche,
right, exactly.
Renault. Thank you, Lisa Mateo. Greatly appreciate that. Joining us right now, this is an important conversation. Lori Calvasina with us, RBC Capital Markets. Lori, I'm really not a big one of linking elections into equity market performance. The adults at RBC Capital Markets go there, link the election to the 2025 equity performance.
So in terms of looking ahead, I hate to break it to you, Tom, but I think stocks tend to do well in any balance of power environment. We've actually back tested that over time. I think that any election issues that we have in the equity market are the nature of short-term repricings that we have to work through. And there are clearly, a lot of people out there who do care about those short-term repricings. If you look historically, though, whether it's Democrats control everything, Republicans control everything, different variations of split government, stocks do tend to go up. And what's interesting to me is that the two best historical scenarios, Republicans control everything or Democratic presidency with a split Congress, those are the two that have been most in focus for investors recently. So I think the election is something we've got to get through. We'll deal with it. We'll reprice what we need to reprice, and then we'll move on.
Can I rip up the script here, folks? we have the best radio studio in the world. It's incredibly wired in. Right now on television, there's not Bloomberg TV, on all of American television, for those of you internationally, there's young studs standing in front of poll results, Paul, and their hands are all going like this. On radio, they're like certain, they're pointing, it's this and this. Do we have a clue, Paul Sweeney, about the polls?
I do not. I assume the polls were almost worthless to me.
It's like entertainment.
And it's not just here in the U.S. You think about what happened in Brexit and other places where the polls just, I think, totally
really
missed
well
it.
said.
So, Lori, we're getting into the earnings season here. This is something we can really sink our teeth into, earnings here. What do you need to see this earnings season? What does the market need to see this earnings season?
So it's a great question, Paul. We put out our weekly this morning, and I made some housekeeping adjustments to my earnings number, and I said, you know what? We did this. It's not that important. At this point in time, the numbers for the year are pretty much set. Companies have a way of achieving those bars. So I really don't care about beat stats, any of that kind of stuff. And frankly, companies are not going to be giving us a lot of guidance this time of year in terms of official numbers. I'm looking for two things. Number one, what are the qualitative comments around things like the U.S. election, the Fed and interest rates, the health of the consumer? I think those are all big things that we've got to monitor. They've been in focus. But really, frankly, Paul, these have been, the comments I'm hearing for companies have been one of the big things keeping me in the soft landing camp, even at times when that soft landing thesis has been doubted. So we're going to be watching that. The second thing I think we need to watch, and this is more quantitative, but can mega cap growth continue its earnings dominance going forward, or can the rest of the market, and I'm thinking more S&P X Mag 7 here, but can they step up and really become the dominant force on earnings? Right. So far, hasn't really happened yet, and I think that's why the rotation trade keeps happening in fits and starts.
Lori Calvasina, my chart of the weekend was a simple two-line chart, and one line was the S&P going up over 8, 9, 10 years, and international markets just going nowhere. Bring that over to your expertise in mid caps and small caps. Is there finally a lift looking out 3 years to mid caps and small caps?
Oh, Tom, I would like to say so. I can't quite get there. I've been feeling a little bit better about the small caps recently, just from the perspective of the economic tailwinds are returning. U.S. economic surprises are turning positive. GDP forecasts are nudging up. But we have two problems in small cap right now. Number one, they're not cheap anymore. We're trading at about a 16.5 times weighted median PE multiple. The average is around 15. So it really, the bar for them to do well is pretty high at this point in time. Secondly, we have seen a number of rallies in small cap over the last year and a half. They've started when the stocks are cheap. People get excited about the Fed. I think that Fed aspect is played out at this point. But the other thing we've seen when those rallies have gotten started is that small caps look oversold on the CFTC data. And guess what? A couple of weeks ago, they actually saw positioning surge, and we're back up to levels that are pretty darn close to the 2016, 2017, and 2018 highs. So oddly enough, even though the performance has been, kind of choppy and we haven't had that big sustainable lift, it does look to me like the positioning is kind of starting to get full again.
Look at that. She's, it's our optimist of the day.
She knows what she's doing. Lori, what screens well for you guys these days? It feels like this market's a little long and in tooth. Any new ideas for folks to think about?
Yeah, so, we actually, did our big analyst survey that we do once a quarter. We did that last week, and we made some changes on our sector recommendations. We kept our overweights on for financials and materials. Our analyst levels of enthusiasm are pretty bullish there, and the valuations look pretty reasonable to me. But those are continued calls. The thing that we did that was new was that we downgraded utilities from overweight to market weight, and we upgraded healthcare from market weight to overweight in its place. And I will tell you a couple things on healthcare. One, very, very robust outlooks from my analysts. So we like that vote of confidence. My utility analysts are constructive, but not quite as much. Secondly, we think we've got a better valuation story in healthcare than utilities. We upgraded utilities to start the year when it was cheap. We kind of dumb lucked our way into the AI trade, but we think that valuation moment is past. And, look, healthcare flows have been improving. They're not wildly positive yet, but we think we're turning the corner. And also, I think the election risk is behind it, and neither candidate's talking much about healthcare.
What's great about this, CFA level 4, there's an entire section on dumb luck.
Yeah, I love it when somebody smart like Lori says, hey, every once in a while you get lucky.
Oh, you have no idea. Lori Calvasina, thank you so much for dumb luck. Greatly appreciate it. RBC Capital Markets, brilliant note today from the troops over at the Royal Bank of Canada. We're 20 minutes away from a conversation with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. First, our news in New York City is Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. 3 weeks out from Election Day, former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are both heading to must-win Pennsylvania today as a new poll shows the presidential race narrowing. Today, Harris is announcing a series of proposals designed to give black men more economic opportunities. Harris's plan includes providing forgivable business loans for entrepreneurs. Meantime, Trump called for raises and bonuses for border agents in an attempt to recruit 10,000 new people to secure the U.S.-Mexico border. A Hezbollah drone attack on a northern Israeli base has left 4 soldiers dead and more than 60 others wounded. That's despite Israel's ground campaign in southern Lebanon aimed at degrading the Iran-backed militia. Bloomberg's Johanna Chua has more from Dubai.
What this tells you is that instead of Hezbollah pulling back because of the number of losses that they've sustained at a commander level and also in terms of military infrastructure, they're being defiant and actually continue to launch drone rockets into northern Israel and central Israel today.
Bloomberg's Johanna Chua in Dubai. The Nobel Prize in Economics was awarded this morning. Hans Ellegren is the Secretary General of the Royal Swedish Academy.
Daron Acemoglu, MIT, Cambridge, USA. Simon Johnson, MIT, Cambridge, USA. And James Robinson, University of Chicago, USA, for studies of how institutions are formed and affect prosperity.
The academics were honored for their work on the differences in prosperity between nations. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Again, thank you to Simon Johnson for a brief conversation this morning, a celebration of his work in economics at MIT. And for those of you worldwide in academics, 10 a.m., there's Acemoglu and Johnson, I believe, out of MIT as well. I got an email in, and they're like, why are you playing Bobby Darin on Columbus Day? And, this is important. We lost him at age 37 from a really difficult heart condition.
Oh, I forgot. Didn't know
His
about that.
accomplishment from being like 15 or 16 and writing songs for Connie Francis was extraordinary. It's like everything Bobby Darin touched turned to gold, including movies. It's good. Walden Robert Casoto was his real name. Out of Bronx School of Science, I believe it is. I'm reading here quickly, but and you could almost, I'm sorry, but this guy, we don't know him because we lost him at age 37.
Yeah.
And he was just incredibly gifted. That's why we played Mac the Knife. With Bobby Darin. We'll do something. I don't know what we've got later here at the 9 o'clock hour. In 15 minutes, Sir Keir Starmer and Steph. I don't know what they talk about. I guess, like, what are you going to do? Is pretty much days. A safe answer. We'll have to see. On that, futures advance, a Sweeney bull market here on Columbus Day. From 8, we're up 17 on futures. NASDAQ futures up 0.5%. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is the Bloomberg's Futures Report, and it is brought to you by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more across CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. All right, futures, we still look mixed right now. This is after two of Wall Street's main indexes set new records. We're talking about the Dow and the S&P. We'll check in with them right now. S&P futures up 0.3%, 5,877. Dow futures down 0.1%, but at 43,100. NASDAQ futures up 0.5% at 20,562. Treasury trading closed for the holiday today. We do have some deal-making news. B. Riley Financial agreed to sell its Great American unit to Oaktree Capital, about $400 million. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. We have B. Riley shares up about 18%. Lundbeck will buy Longboard Pharmaceuticals for $60 a share. We have Longboard soaring up 51%. And private equity groups TPG, Blackstone teamed up to work on a joint bid for eye care company Bausch & Lomb. That's according to the Financial Times. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. There's Keir Starmer coming up here in about 15 minutes from London, from Guildhall in London with Steph Flanders. We do better. Before that, we've got Lady Amrita Sen. We're giving her promotion this morning with energy aspects as well. Amrita, just we're thrilled you're here. I got to go to oil in a minute. But the first 100 days for labor, forget about Labor Tory and all that. But the first 100 days for Secure has been a challenge, right?
It has been a challenge. I think from an energy policy standpoint, very few people are happy about certain kind of policies that are being talked about right now. Not a lot of clarity for investments for companies. So that's a challenge. But I think overall, though, there's still a bit more stability in terms of, regardless of the challenge, I'm hoping that, take the energy bit out, we just get a bit of peace and calm.
I have to talk about energy aspects abilities, which is incredible microeconomics around the price of oil. The zeitgeist over the weekend is MBS and Saudi Arabia are beginning to flex their productive muscles. Describe what Saudi Arabia wants to do when they see Kazakhstan overproducing.
So I think, Tom, you'll be the only one who'll understand when I say this, right? Because I've struggled explaining this. What Saudi Arabia is saying is, we don't want a free rider problem. We don't want to be the ones cutting production and you take advantage of us and you are increasing production. Now, however, they are not saying for a second we're going to repeat 2020, flood the market by pushing production to 12 million barrels per day. They're saying we want to go ahead with the small planned increases, as we've already announced to the world, because you are supposed to be cutting and you have compensation cuts. So even if we bring back production, net, there shouldn't be any oil in the market.
Paul, this is like a conversation you and I would have had in 1986 when we were both driving VW diesels.
Exactly. So, Amrita, what do you estimate the risk premium is for geopolitics today in the market today? Because it seemed like prices were coming down, and then we had that escalation just over the last month or so.
I mean, you could argue that since that news broke, we're about $8-10 higher. But I would also flip it around the other way and say, weren't we a bit too low, regardless of, all the kind of fundamental bearishness that's there in the market? What I'm really grappling with this year is inventories for crude oil are incredibly low everywhere.
Low.
Cushing, very low. Cushing in Oklahoma has been near record lows. Globally, we are pretty much at record lows. On a days of forward cover basis. But the market doesn't care about that because they expect huge bills next year. So somehow we've kind of skipped a step and we're talking about next year. And that's why, otherwise Israel, Iran, would we be at $75? We would be at 120 or higher.
So what's different, though, just in the last X number of years, is that the U.S. is now a net exporter. Are they good? Are they good partners in the global energy market? Are they efficient? Are they reasonable? Or, how is the U.S. producer these days behaving?
I think the U.S. producer has completely shifted the paradigm, right, in terms of supply risks, how markets look at generally geopolitical supply risks, because the U.S. has been a steady source of growth. My concern is U.S. production is starting to kind of plateau. Doesn't mean it's going to start declining. This year, U.S. production is flat versus last year. Some issues with gas constraints because they didn't have enough gas pipelines. Now they are starting up, so we'll get some production growth next year. But Permian producers are telling us they're running out of good quality acreage. Bakken producers are saying the same thing. So I don't think, fast forward 2 years, the U.S. is necessarily going to be the kind of savior it has been in this market. And I just sense a huge amount of complacency in this market because there's a lot of recency bias.
So we're, let's call it just under $80 a barrel. Everyone listening and watching us, good morning, on YouTube, is like, wait, why isn't oil higher given the Eastern Mediterranean? His geopolitical, what's your number value of geopolitical risk if we actually get geopolitical risk? Is it $10 a barrel?
I think it's going to be higher because everybody in this market is short. But now, what is a geopolitical risk? I think the market is tired of putting in a premium because over the last 5 years, we haven't lost supplies because of geopolitical risk headlines. What the market will have to see is an actual supply loss. If you do see that, then I think the upside is significantly higher.
How about Russia? Wasn't that a supply loss, or is that oil still getting out of the system?
It's just redirected, right? And I think that was a big turning point for the market because a lot of traders bet on Russian oil being lost. But the sanctions were pretty toothless in terms of actual supply losses. It just was always about hurting revenues. So we've had all that oil go to the east. India and China are buying all that oil. And that's not been a problem.
Is it not a problem for Europe? Has Europe weaned itself off of Russian energy?
By force, yes. Europe still consumes 14 to 15 million barrels per day of crude oil, as in refines about that much. Varies depending on your definition of Europe and so on. So it's not paying up for it. It's more expensive for Europe.
I want to audible here. We can do this with Amrita Sen. As we prepare for a conversation with Keir Starmer, the compare is with Tony Blair. From where you sit in London, Amrita Sen, he wants to capture that pixie dust of Tony Blair, but he just can't do it in this time and place. Am I right?
I think that's fair. And I'm not 100% sure that he necessarily wants to be the next Tony Blair either, given everything else that's going on in the Middle East. And I think he's been very clear about where UK's position is. But I think he does have a lot of challenges at hand. And again, it's not been easy. The UK economy isn't doing particularly well either. So all of his energy has to focus on getting the economy up and running and, reducing unemployment and just kind of creating growth again.
But he went to the University of Leeds. He's not, Oxbridge and all that. The bottom line is the economy's prospering, in 2 miles of London, in Edinburgh maybe? What's he going to do, or the Tories going to do, to be bipartisan? What are they going to do for Leeds and the challenges of Leeds, England?
I think that's essentially exactly like you said, the issue. London is booming, but that's not the same for the rest of the UK. And therefore, the challenges do become, is there tax reform on the cards? Is it going to be more pushed towards green energy to at least stimulate more of the domestic economy? There's a lot to be done.
Are you moving to New York? Is that why,
No, I'm staying in London.
But you're going to Houston back and forth.
I do go to Houston back and forth, and let's not talk about U.S. elections. I'll stay in London.
Russia and oil. Can Putin move the price of oil? I got 30 seconds.
No, not anymore.
He's not in control.
Well, unless he decides to turn it off, which he can't because he needs the revenues.
Yeah. Okay. Amrita Sen, thank you so much. In studio with Energy Aspects. And again, we protect the copyright of Amrita Sen, and all of our guests look to Energy Aspects London for their brilliant breakout. I can't say enough. It's like Adam Szymanski, Paul, at Deutsche Bank years ago with Paul Sankey. It's like all supply and demand dynamics, the price theory, the microeconomics. It's not, some people go 60,000 feet and all that. Amrita goes right into the dynamics of it.
Well, I can actually understand it. That's why I like her research.
Well,
I can actually say,
too.
I get this. I understand what you just said there.
Amrita Sen, thank you so much. We are 8 minutes away from a conversation with Sir Keir Starmer. Amrita giving us, in good spirit, a nice overlay of what's going on in the United Kingdom. Our Steph Flanders in conversation with the Prime Minister. Futures advance on this Columbus Day up 18. From New York City, on YouTube, on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. So how the market's going to kick things off to start this new trading week after the Dow, S&P set new records. There's also plenty for investors to watch in the week ahead, bank earnings to retail sales. Let's get a look at the numbers as they start to come in on this Monday. We have the S&P 500 up 0.2%, 5,830. The Dow right now down about 0.1%, 42,819. And we have the NASDAQ right now. That is up about 0.3%, 18,426. Don't forget the bond market closed for today. Let's take a look at commodities. We have spot gold lower, $2,653 an ounce. We have Brent crude $77 a barrel. WTI crude $74 a barrel. As for currencies, the dollar stronger, Japanese yen weaker at 149.85 against the dollar. Euro, British pound weaker, at Bitcoin up 3% at around 65,000. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. In a few moments here, Stephanie Flanders with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Paul, we rip up the script, and the major message from Labour is they are challenged by a first 100 days of their stunning victory over the Conservatives, the Republicans, the Tories, is they want to rip up the red tape of the United Kingdom. That's clearly the theme here.
Okay. I mean, I don't know where you start, given some of the red tape that that resulted from Brexit in terms of doing business. So I would think there's a lot of areas where they could probably do that.
Absolutely dead on that. And you mentioned earlier the shock of the polling of Brexit. I remember talking with Ken Rogoff of Harvard about it. That was a 50-50 referendum. If it had been 60-40, there never would have been Brexit. It barely won. But this redounds from John Farrell on set the day of Brexit in London. I'm watching him, and the answer is they're still recovering from the shock of Brexit. And in this case, the major theme of Labour is to rip up the red tape. Keir Starmer is an interesting guy, to say the least. For our American audience, he did, you think about the axis of Ivy League schools in America, the same thing in the United Kingdom. That is not the path of Keir Starmer. Yes, a law degree from Oxford, but he started out at the University of Leeds years ago, and with some significant work in criminal defense, some very famous cases there. This guy was a worker bee, if you will, within law in the United Kingdom, and built up Labour is they moved away from Jeremy Corbyn. And of course, the trophy was taken here with the recent election, where I'm going to editorialize and say they absolutely trounced the right of Theresa May and others along the way. I mean, it's been a whole new view for Labour. So we're going to go to London to this important conversation. Our Stephanie Flanders driving all of our economics. Stephanie Flanders with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Thank you so much. And we are delighted to have the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, with us at the International Investment Summit here in London. Prime Minister, in your speech earlier today to the summit, you vowed to do everything in your power to galvanise growth in the UK. But if you look at the sharp decline in business and consumer confidence since you were elected, since you started talking about all the tough times ahead, the tax rises ahead, you'd be forgiven for thinking you'd done the opposite to growth. So I guess I'm wondering, are you feeling now you might have overdone all of that a bit?
Well, today was very much a statement of intent to say very clearly that economic growth is the #1 mission of this government. And that means that we're open for business as a country. We want to drive that investment into our economy. And we want to see that in jobs, secure jobs in different parts and all around the United Kingdom. So that's very much the message from today. There's been a drumbeat of inward investment over recent weeks, which I think demonstrates that although, yes, of course, we've had to signal that there are tough decisions to make because of the damage that's been done to our economy, and we've just got to be straight with people about that. We do have amazing assets in this country in terms of our skills, our people, our universities, our cutting edge when it comes to technologies like AI, for example. And that's why making that really clear statement of intent today was very important. And I think quite a lot of the inward investment decisions we've seen, running into tens of billions, are vindication, if you like, of the approach that we're taking in partnership with the investors and the businesses, many of whom are here today.
I mean, one of the things that you've been clear about was that tax, and the Chancellor's been clear about, is that difficult decisions will be needed, tax increases will be needed to pay for that investment in public services that people are expecting. And given all the taxes that you've ruled out, there's a lot of concern here in the business community about increases in capital gains tax and in wealth tax. Now, I know you're not going to want to go into the details of the budget, but are you reassuring the investors here that they have nothing to worry about on that score?
Well, I'm not going to get into the details of the budget. You wouldn't expect me to. But neither am I going to shy away from the fact that we've got difficult decisions to make. The last government left a £22 billion black hole, and we're not going to walk past that. We're going to have to deal with it. So that'll be tough. But what I've been able to be very clear with investors and businesses is because growth is the #1 mission, then decisions, whether it's on the budget or anything else, will be determined by whether they help growth or not. So that's the lens through which we're seeing this. But I have to say, the discussion here, we've had intense discussions all day long, last night as well, with a number of people in the room that we've got to know over the last 2 years. So this is the first time we're meeting. All of the discussion today has not actually been about tax. It's been about planning. It's been about the regulatory environment. It's been about getting infrastructure moving much more quickly and the sort of apparatus of government working to that common end. That's the real discussion that's going on here. That's the real focus. And actually, contrary to perhaps what people might think, tax is not the first thing that businesses and investors are raising with me. First thing they're raising with me is it really your #1 mission? Is it going to be stable and strategic and for the long term, to which the answer is yes? And are you prepared to do the tough things on execution and the deliverables, which is about the length of time it takes from investment decision to actually seeing a project materialise? That's where I think we've been able to do a lot of reassurance that yes, we understand that, and we're determined to do the follow-through on growth that is desperately needed for investors, for our country, and for the jobs of the future.
But forgive me, Prime Minister, but I think a lot of people, they may not be talking about it to you, but a lot of people are worried in this sort of vacuum that we've had, quite a long wait for the budget. There's quite a lot of what might be just crazy speculation around where capital gains tax might go, for example. So something like a 39% rate. Can you reassure people that whatever the change is, it won't be anything that significant?
Well, quite a lot of speculation is getting pretty wide of the mark. But
so you say that 39 is wide of the mark?
Yeah, it's getting to the area which is wide of the mark. But I'm not going to fuel the speculation, because we can go on like this for a very long time until budget day. Everybody knows that until budget day, none of it is going to be revealed. It was important that when we came into office, into government, we looked at the books, we assessed the state of the economy. We needed to understand the damage that's been done, and that £22 billion black hole is a real problem that we've got to deal with, and make sure that we go through all the processes necessary for a properly thought through budget. So that's why we put the timing as it is. It's the right timing. But equally, it's been really fantastic to have this investment summit just a few weeks before the budget, where the mood music here is very upbeat. People are talking about a real opportunity now to invest in the UK, comparing it as a sort of relative advantage across the world. We want to seize that opportunity and take it forward with many of the investors that are here.
You're looking at the books, but obviously people are also just sort of checking when they think about, I know you're not going to reveal what's on the budget, but when they're thinking about what you've committed to and what you've not committed to. For example, the pledge not to increase national insurance contributions. Most people I talk to think that if you increase the employer side of that, the employer contribution, that would be breaking that pledge. Can we, without getting into the budget, can I just check that is your understanding, that that would be breaking that pledge?
Well, you're saying without getting into the budget, then tempting me
well, it's just you're
further and further down.
Explaining your pledge.
We made very clear commitments in our manifesto, and we intend to deliver on those commitments. Beyond that, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for the budget for the details, for very obvious reasons. We're still weeks away from the final assessment in the budget.
I guess that what feel, you said it's the right timing for this summit. It does feel a bit odd that for those people in the room, people who are doing deals today, you can't promise them that the basic tax environment for entrepreneurship, for business, for wealth, in a couple of weeks' time won't be completely different.
Well, they're very interested that corporation tax is capped. They know exactly where that is in the long term. They're very interested in the fact that we're able to say that because we've got a good, strong majority in government, we're able to make decisions based on years, not months, with a clear strategy. They're very, very interested when I talk to them about being a mission-driven government, a government with a real sense of purpose measured over years, with one central purpose, which is wealth creation translated into jobs in different parts of the United Kingdom. That's the sort of stability that they're looking for, and that's the conversations we're having. They're very pleased to hear that from a government, very pleased about the clarity. There's no end of people here today who said the clarity of the message is really welcome. It's now the follow-through, which is actually the execution of it. What are you prepared to do when it comes to planning? What are you prepared to do when it comes to regulation? It's not just the number of regulations, it's the inconsistency of regulation that we need to deal with. And when I'm able to say with real confidence and certainty and clarity, yes, we're going to deal with that, that leads the decisions, in my view, to make the sort of investment that we've seen in recent weeks, which is very welcome. These are not just big numbers, although they are big numbers. They translate into jobs around the United Kingdom, good, well-paid, secure jobs. And that's the change we promised at the election and the change that I'm determined to deliver on.
So you talked about mission-led government, and ethics-led government's obviously been a feature. You had a sort of unfortunate slip on the way to this summit involving DP World, which I'm not going to go into, you'll be glad to know. But there is another company, Keene, which was considered to be such a rogue operator in the US that it hasn't been able to list on the US stock market. It was too controversial, its working practices. But it seems that that your government is continuing their sort of open arms policy for wanting Keene to list here. Is that right? Well,
I think we've got to get the balance right, and clearly we've got to have standards, high standards. We do have high standards, not least, for example, in rights at work, and I addressed that in my speech here today to say, look, better rights and protection for people in their workplace are good for growth. So we're clear where we stand on standards, but we're future looking, we're pragmatic. and subject to those standards, then yes, we do want investment into the United Kingdom because we desperately need growth in this economy. We haven't had meaningful growth in the economy in the United Kingdom for 14 long years. We're determined to turn that around.
But just to be clear on that, so the government would need to be sure that Sheen's not using forced labour in Xinjiang before it could list in the UK?
Well, I'm not going to get into individual businesses. What I will say, and be very clear about it, standards and high standards do matter to us. So of course we'll be looking at any issue that goes to high standards, with a particular feature on the rights of the workforce. We've been really clear that we see that as two sides of the same coin when it comes to growth. Good employment rights and protections, and a lot of drag on growth. They're fundamental for growth, and I think pretty well all good businesses understand that, which is why in many cases they've already put in place some of the rights and protections that we're bringing forward in legislation.
On China, and you had an interesting conversation with Eric Schmidt this morning that touched on China. I'm interested, right now we have the Chinese army holding drills around democratically governed Taiwan, which they admit are a rehearsal or a practice for a full naval blockade of this place that produces most of the high-quality advanced chips in the world. I'm just wondering, we have the Foreign Secretary on his way to Beijing later in the week. Do you worry about the timing? Do you worry about the signal that sends on a week that the army is literally practicing potentially an invasion or a blockade of Taiwan?
Well, the approach I'd take is this, that national security has to come first. So that's the number one priority. And therefore, of course, we challenge where it's necessary to do so. But we're also pragmatic, and we want our country to move forward and to succeed. So challenge where it's necessary. But there are areas
but not
where...
necessary when they're drilling
we
this
have
kind of practice.
Challenged. We do challenge. I myself spoke to the President. We do challenge where it's necessary to do so. But we are pragmatic as well, and we need to make sure that we get that balance right when it comes to our relation with China.
Just to follow up on that, when you say pragmatic, it feels like you're going to be more pragmatic than the previous government. They ceased into that sort of major economic cooperation, the dialogues, other things, when China imposed the national security law on Hong Kong. Are we sort of officially saying we're over that now?
Well, I think the problem with the last government is they veered from one side of the road to the other side of the road and then back again, and that just led to a pretty chaotic approach. I think everybody understands the national security first approach that we must take and will take. Everybody understands that we do challenge where it's necessary to do so. But equally, when it comes to, for example, climate change, we're going to have to work with countries like China because it's the only way that we can all go forward.
Prime Minister, we've run out of time, but thank you very much for joining us. Good luck with the rest of the summit.
Thank you.
Stephanie Flanders in conversation with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, some inside baseball there. But the heart of the matter is Labour is trying to speak to business to recharge, regroup, and unregulate, I should say, as well. Tomorrow, John Micklethwaite in conversation from Chicago with Donald Trump, looking forward to that. It'll be interesting to see, given the 4 or 5 day news flow that we see on that, what will occur. We'll look for that tomorrow, 12 noon, in Balance of Power. Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons will be involved at 11:30 a.m. Red and green on the screen right now. Dow lags fractionally, but NASDAQ 100 up 0.8%. I'm sorry, Paul, it just pulls away.
It does. We're starting to see some movement there, led by, just in terms of points, NVIDIA once again, Tom. That's up 2.3%. That's leading the way. Apple, Microsoft, some of the big names you'd expect.
It last went down when Sir Keir met with the king.
That's right. Okay, very good.
There it is. I'm sorry, NVIDIA. It's not up to a record high going back to July, but there it is with a nice leg up the last number of days. We need to advance forward on Columbus Day with our Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa Mateo.
You've got it. And we've got, we're on records watch. So we have stocks mixed right now. So I want to get to the numbers right away. Right now, the S&P 500 up about 0.5% at 5,844. We have the Dow down 0.1%, 42,820. And the NASDAQ up 0.8% at 18,498. I want to take a little closer look where the biggest boost coming from. If you look at the IMAP feature, the 11 major industry groups, the biggest push coming from information technology. You go a little further, you see semiconductors, then semiconductor materials. Finally, at the top, applied materials. Their shares up about 3.5%. I want to point out Bitcoin before we go. Yes, up more than 3.5% at 65,000. Crypto-linked companies rallying. You have MicroStrategy up about 5%. Clean Spark up 4%. And Marathon Digital up about 4%. Don't forget the bond market closed for the holiday. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Elise Mateo, thanks so much. Joining us now on the election, Mike Shepard's with us, where there's just a ton of experience on how things can change 22 days out from an election. Of course, executive editor for Bloomberg News in Washington. I mean, he's large. He played varsity lacrosse at Georgetown.
They're serious about that stuff down there.
That's like, football at, Texas.
I know. They're crazy down there. And that whole Washington, Baltimore, crazy lacrosse.
It's like hockey at Clarkson.
Yes.
Do you know where Clarkson is?
No.
Clarkson is so far north. They speak French. It's, Canton, New York. It's up there. They're all engineers, and they spend the whole day in the ice rink. Not in the ice rink. Mike Shepard with us from Washington and Bloomberg News 99.1. Good morning in Washington. Mike Shepard, 22 days. What is the Harris campaign doing this morning after Saturday Night Live Family Feud Saturday night?
Well, they're looking ahead, Tom. They're really not sweating too much what they see on the talk shows or even on the comedy shows over the weekend. They're focusing on the swing states, and most particularly those blue wall states, the northern industrial states of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. She and her campaign and her running mate, they're going to be spending a lot of time there this week and through the weekend. They're trying to lock down support there.
I'm assuming that Donald Trump is not going to change message. We'll find out tomorrow as John Micklethwait speaks with the former president, Economic Club of Chicago, 12 noonish Wall Street time. But Mike Shepard, does the Harris campaign have to change the dialogue, or is it steady as she goes?
Well, in a way, they are trying to focus on one group of concern to the campaign, and that is black voters. There was some research over the weekend that the New York Times published that indicated that as many as 15% of black voters, likely black voters, may end up supporting Donald Trump come November 5th. And that is concerning because it's an increase from the numbers that we have seen in past elections when it came to black voters supporting Democratic presidential candidates. So a lot of the outreach over the next few days will be focused on trying to reach black men and black voters. We saw it over the weekend in North Carolina, and we will see it in a series of events over the coming days. The vice president will even appear on the radio show hosted by Charlemagne the God tomorrow in Detroit. So we're going to see more and more of this from the campaign in coming days as she tries to make an appeal to these voters. We heard the head of the Congressional Black Caucus say on Sunday during one of the Sunday talk shows that he was concerned that black men may either stay at home or cast their ballots for Donald Trump. So the vice president has some work to do to try to gin up more enthusiasm for her candidacy with this core constituency.
So, Mike, I've heard from you and from others pundits that, the real focus is on these handful of swing states. I don't think New York is one of them. Why is former President Trump going to do a rally at Madison Square Garden?
Well, it's a great question, Paul, because this rally will be a little bit more than a week before the election. And you may wonder, why is he bothering with New York? In a way, this is to try to seize the national stage, much in the same way that he did in going to Coachella, California. Again, hardly a Republican stronghold. The state has voted Democratic in the past, I don't know how many elections. I could give you a number the next time I come on. But in a way, he is using these Democratic bastions as a signal to the country that he commands a mass appeal, that he has support even in areas where he normally wouldn't.
I mean, I'm not going to rip up the script here overnight. And folks, I do not have the statistics in front of me, the news in front of me. Mike Shepard's better at this than I am. So they're at Coachella and they're not watching Ariana Grande. Okay, they're going out there. It's in the middle of nowhere. And the reports, Mike Shepard, I don't know if Bloomberg has a story, is the many people that went to see the former president had trouble getting 6 miles back or 10 miles back, whatever. Is that a big deal for the national press? I mean, does former President Trump, with his unique approach to campaigning, is he get a free pass on that versus the acuity of going after Vice President Harris?
Well, what we've seen from Trump voters in the past is that they have given him a pass on a lot of things, including some of his rhetoric that has come across as, quite frankly, hostile or either underinformed or outright false, in the assumption that there are other things that they will benefit from. The Trump voters right now are looking at what they remember when they look back. When they look back at his time in office, they have nostalgia for what they feel was a stronger and better economy than today. The data may differ, but it is really about how they felt during the economy, during that time when he was in office, and they are trying to recapture some of that. And Trump is also succeeding in a way in playing on people's fears, voters' fears, about migration and the border. And that was another key point that he has been hammering home in a series of appearances over the past several days.
Mike, thanks so much. Mike Shepard with us in Washington with Bloomberg News. 22 days out. I saw that banner. It's like,
that
whoa.
gets your attention, right?
I'm still not. I'm so hardwired, Paul, to a traditional American schedule. My brain, folks, is not like October 14th. It's, this is like we're having June chat.
Yeah.
Or July chat, or maybe second week of August chat. And instead, we're 22 days away. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming up quickly. I mean, November 5th is going to be here before you know it. And I'm not sure what's going to change. You talk to some of these experts like Mike Shepard from Bloomberg News, and everybody says too close to call. You're talking about maybe a really small number of votes that's going to decide this thing. And when will we ever get final results? Will it be the night of November 5th? Will it be a day after, 2 days after, or even longer?
We're committed to it with David Gurr's leadership and what we see with balance of power. And again, Bloomberg News in conversation with Donald Trump tomorrow, our editor-in-chief, John Micklethwaite, with that. Paul, I got to spend a minute and a half here after the Lucas Shaw entertainment extravaganza in L.A. And I think Howard Stringer was actually I watched a little bit of the Sony executive, the Sony icon, if you will, talking about the challenges of Hollywood. Paul, I'm looking at the chart of Warner Brothers Discovery.
Oh, boy.
I mean, the entire industry needs a Hail Mary right now, right?
It does, and I'm not sure what that Hail Mary is. The folks at Warner Brothers Discovery, David Zaslav, the CEO, is saying more consolidation is needed. I'm not sure that is the answer at all, but I can see he just wants to maybe get bigger, and size may help.
My consolidation, and I rarely look at the TV, but it's on in the house, full disclosure, YouTube and Netflix and all the rest of the idiocy, is now everybody's, even if they're separate, they're collating all their shows into Amazon. Is Amazon the one secretly winning the war into the end of the year?
Oh, totally, absolutely. They've absolutely won the war. Now, if you're Disney, you're Warner Brothers Discovery, you're saying, what kind of market share can I get right next to, right next to Netflix? Because Netflix is there, they're not going anywhere. But what kind of niche can I carve out? And if you're Disney, you have grand ambitions. Everybody else a little bit smaller, I think, at this point.
We're going to have to see. And you've got Rich Greenfield
today. Rich
today.
Greenfield coming on in the next hour.
Yeah, I can't say enough about Rich Greenfield and
absolutely.
The work he's done on technology, really clear-sighted work. He's got truly some iconic buy-hold sells. It's Columbus Day. I'll be at the parade, checking it out. We're playing Italian Americans. After SNL, you play Ariana.